Morning. I declare open this public hearing of the Senate, Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee. The Senate has referred to the committee the particulars of proposed expenditure for 22-23 and related documents for the infrastructure, transport, regional development, communications and the arts portfolio, excluding communications and the arts. All questions on communications and the arts go to the department's appearance before the Environment and Communications Legislation Committee. The committee may also examine the annual reports of the departments and agencies appearing before it. The committee has before it a program listing agencies relating to matters for which senators have given notice, and the proceedings today will begin with an examination of the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts. The committee has fixed Friday, the 16th of December 2022 as the date for the return of answers to questions taken on notice. Senators are encouraged to provide any written questions on notice to the committee secretariat as soon as possible. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session. This includes answers to questions on notice. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The Senate, by resolution in 1999, endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. Any questions going to the operations or financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purpose of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the Senate has resolved that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a discretion to withhold details or explanations from the Parliament or its committees unless the Parliament has expressly provided otherwise. The Senate has resolved also that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I particularly draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate from the 13th of May 2009, specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement that information or a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Instead, witnesses are required to provide some specific indication of the harm to the public interest that could result from the disclosure of the information or the document. An officer called to answer a question for the first time should state their full name and the capacity in which they appear, and witnesses should speak clearly and into the microphones to assist Hansard to record proceedings. Could I please remind everyone present to switch off their mobile phones or render them inaudible. Senators, departments and agencies have been provided with advice on the arrangements in place to ensure the budget estimates 2022-23 hearings are conducted in a safe environment. This guidance is also available from the Secretariat. The committee appreciates the cooperation of all attendees in adhering to these arrangements. Now, I welcome Senator the Honourable Carol Brown, Assistant Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Mr Jim Betts, Secretary of the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts, and all the officers of the department. Assistant Minister, do you or Mr Betts wish to make an opening statement?
I don't wish to make an opening statement.
Thank you. So I'll now call representatives from the...
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'd just like a couple of points, if I may, Chair.
Yes, my apologies.
No worries at all. First of all, the committee will recall that at our last couple of sessions I explained that the Minister was awaiting responses from a number of her state counterparts to the letters which she sent to each of them on budget night. And I explained that the Minister considered it would have been disrespectful to publish the attachments to those letters without first allowing her state and territory colleagues a reasonable time in which to respond. As the committee knows, the Victorian Minister responded prior to that state entering into the pre-election caretaker period. We've now received responses from the ACT and Tasmania, but also the Minister now considers that a reasonable time has elapsed, and whilst we still haven't received confirmation from a number of other jurisdictions, I'm pleased to say we are able to table all the attachments to those budget night letters, and that will happen electronically now. So that's the first thing I wanted to say.
Great, thank you, Mr Betts.
Secondly, late yesterday afternoon I received a letter from Senator Mackenzie requesting a range of information. The schedules released this morning will answer a number of the Senator's requests, although we're happy to go through the detail on those. For other aspects of that request, we'll endeavour to provide full answers this morning and take any more complex requests on notice in the usual way.
Thank you. So, Senator, I'm going to go Senator Canavan. You're the lead, so you're calling your colleague over there, Senator Mackenzie.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So, Mr Betts, thank you very much for facilitating our understanding of the budget and putting those documents online. I hope someone back in my office is downloading them right now so that we'll be able to actually refer to them at some point in the next 3 hours if we need to. I just wanted to briefly turn it's a letter from you, Assistant Minister, but on behalf of Minister King regarding us seeking information about funding decisions, etc., and project lists, where Minister King has claimed public interest immunity around prejudicing relations between Commonwealth and state and why this information can't be given. But she does state, or it's from you, Carol, Assistant Minister Brown, that once you have gotten a letter, the confirmation letter from the states that Mr Betts was talking about, that those projects would be uploaded, that project list would be uploaded to a website that is quoted in your letter. As of yesterday, and we were still sitting into the wee hours of last night, the Victorian, I know that we had the Victorian letter back from them regarding this, but we hadn't uploaded the spreadsheet that you say you were going to in the advice tabled in the Senate yesterday. So can I just get confirmation if that has happened? And now that we know that the ACT and Tasmania have similarly written back, have we also uploaded, as this letter states to me, those lists of projects?
Well, it should be uploaded, so I'll just seek some advice from the Secretary.
So my understanding is, and Mr Hallinan joining me at the table, that all of that information is provided as of now.
Is it on the federalfinancialrelations.gov.au agreements, land transport, infrastructure projects 2019-2024 public website that in the letter to the President of the Senate, Sue Lyons, you said it would once you received the letters back from the states?
David Hallinan, Deputy Secretary. Senator, that information was tabled to this committee, but we've been awaiting all of the responses before we'll upload it to the FFR website.
So I'm going to the OPD request from the Senate, and again, very disrespectful behaviour. But what Senator Brown's advice to the President of the Senate was on that request was that once agreed to by jurisdictions, Part C, this information is publicly available here, and it gives a website. Now, Victoria has agreed, and agreed the last time we all caught up, and yet the Victorian projects are not at the website that was quoted to the President of the Senate. Now we find out that ACT and Tasmania have also agreed, and I'm assuming their stuff's not on that website either. So why have you told the Senate, the President of the Senate, that that's what the process is, but it's clearly not?
Senator, as I said, that they're usually uploaded as a bulk list, and what we've done instead is table information to this committee when we've had that information available and the states have responded.
So you have the information.
No, it's not about having the information, it's about respect for the Senate anyway.
I'm just getting confused. Is the information, is that up, and this is about the infrastructure investment program, that's what we're talking about?
That's correct.
Has that been uploaded to this Federal Financial Relations website, or has it been tabled to the committee? So I'm just getting confused.
Been tabled to this committee
Okay.
at each stage of signature. When we've had the jurisdictions come back, we've had 2 more jurisdictions come back, which you've identified.
Right.
I think the Secretary has advised that we're tabling all of those documents today and have done so through the committee secretariat this morning, including the other jurisdictions. But it hasn't been uploaded to the FFR website because we don't tend to do that until it's a bulk lot.
Well, that's not what the letter to the President of the Senate says from Carol Brown, from Assistant Minister. I'm very, very happy to read it out or to table it because I find it passing strange that Senator Brown has made clear to the President of the Senate, claiming public interest immunity over the actual letters, which, you know, obviously have issues, and we'll be prosecuting that when we come back in February. But in regards to Clause C, which was, can we have copies of the tables prepared by the department for each state and territory outlining projects under the IIP as at October budget, and in the information tabled to the Senate on the 1st of December, once you've got agreement from states, you say, once agreed by jurisdictions, this information will be publicly available on the federalfinancialrelations.gov.au. So what I'm hearing is you're telling the Senate that you're semi-complying with some of the Senate's directions, but in actual fact that information isn't available where you say it's available. Assistant Minister, can I count on you as a senator who does respect the work of the Senate to ensure that that's uploaded to that today?
Senator Mackenzie, and thank you for your kind words. There's a couple of things. One, you've got the information now, but secondly, I think one of the issues is that the website is actually managed by Treasury. But yes, we will make all endeavours to make
Well, we've had the
sure it
letter
is.
from Victoria for a while.
Understand what you're saying, but it is.
Has it been sent to Treasury to upload, Mr Betts?
I don't know. I'll take that on notice. I'll find out what's...
Could we find out? Because, like, you've told the President that it's up there.
So we've also...
Turns out it's not.
So notwithstanding the fact that we haven't heard back from a number of jurisdictions, we've also provided the information in full this morning. So I completely take your point about the website. We'll look into that and we'll make sure that's dealt with expeditiously, but you have the information.
No, it's not about me. It's about what you've told the Senate. So we've just got to make sure we stick to the program. Okay, I just wanted to go to... first topic will be road and rail project funding, and I need Mr Bradley at the table.
You can do that.
So, Mr Bradley, you're very, very helpful with the ROSI funding for Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. I'd also like to understand the full detailed list of road and rail projects under the IIP that have been reduced over the forward estimates for Victoria, then New South Wales and South Australia. Don't worry about giving me the ROSI numbers because you did that last time, didn't you?
So I think last time we provided you the major movements, which included ROSI, but also some other projects.
Yes, the cut ones. Yeah,
Yep.
a couple.
And I think if we were to go through all of the movements, Senator, it might be simpler just to refer to the tables
To the
that have been
table.
provided to the committee secretariat in response to Senator Canavan's letter. But we can go through each line if you like.
It would have been helpful to have that last night. Okay, we'll go to the Goulburn Valley Highway, Shepparton Bypass Stage 1. A $260 million project to which the former government committed $208 million. Can the department advise of the status of this project, please?
Certainly, Senator. Rob Bradley, Assistant Secretary of the Victorian, Tasmania, South Australia branch. As you've said, Senator, the Australian Government commitment to that project is $208 million. through the October budget, the funding for that project was moved outside of the forward estimates. That reflects that the commitment that the Australian Government has at the moment is insufficient to deliver that project. Victoria hasn't committed its funding to that project either, although they paid for the business case. We'll be working with Victoria to look at what might be the best approach to delivering a project there for the people.
So when do we expect construction to start then, if that all goes well?
So, Senator, there's a fair bit of work to be done through the planning of that project. The current environmental impact statement for it is 15 years out of date, so there'll be a fair bit of work we'll need to do with Victoria to understand. I think also, as you sort of noted, there's a $208 million investment. I think the actual cost to deliver that project is going to be closer around the $1 billion mark. So I think...
Is that only for stage one, the $1 billion, or is it for a completed?
So the commitment at the moment is that 208
No, I
is
know
for
that.
stage one of the bypass. The work that Victoria's done to date to look at the costings of what it's going to deliver stage one, getting across that Golden Valley floodplain is going to be quite a significant piece of work. There's about 3 options they've looked at. They're all going to come in up and around that $1 billion mark.
For only stage one?
For stage
Yep.
one. So.
Okay. Can you just outline the difference in the funding profile then for this project?
I can. Essentially, though, funding has been moved outside the forward estimates to allow us time to work with Victoria. But
You've got the 10-year profile there.
I do have the profile. Golden Valley. So previously at PFO, the funding profile was in 22-23, there was 46 million. 23-24, there was 45 million. 24-25, there was 53.5 million. 25-26, there was 30 million. And 26-27, there was 33.5 million. As a result of the October budget, the entire $208 million commitment has been moved to 26-27.
Wow.
Well, as I said, Senator, that's to give us time to work with Victoria.
Yep,
to
but
look
the
at-
whole 208.
Because the project's not ready to proceed, so that aligns with Victoria's advice as where they wanted the funding to.
The key challenge, Senator, with that project is that when the detailed costings have been undertaken by the state that will deliver it, they've come in about 5 times the budget that's available.
Yeah, I think
for
you'll
it.
find the same thing with the suburban rail loop. Okay.
That. You said it's underfunded, so how much is it was it underfunded by? 5 times, how much is that?
About $800 million.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So how was the timeline determined to put the whole 208 in 26-27? Was that a decision of the department or the minister?
That's a decision of the government, and it's putting the project into a stage where we're negotiating with Victoria on what can be delivered and what the project is going to cost to deliver it.
So Victoria didn't provide any advice of when they'd like to see the funding, and they thought they might get their environmental impact studies done and updated?
Senator, that will go to Cabinet deliberative process.
No,
so
it won't.
It does. The negotiations
No,
with
it
each
won't.
jurisdiction feed into the decision of Cabinet on these. And
So is this a decision of Victoria coming to the government and saying we need it to be pushed out here?
As we've explained in the last 3 hearings, these have been negotiations with each jurisdiction to develop the budget.
Are you aware of any businesses that had undertaken tenders to undertake planning or construction work for this project? Given that up until a month ago, funding was $46 million was on the table for 22-23?
Not aware of that, Senator. And I think the work we've been doing sort of with discussions with Council and with Victoria, there was still a fair bit of planning to be done, including that update of the EIS.
So that was actually my question. It was about the planning work that needed to be done. Are you aware of any businesses that had tendered to do the planning?
No, Senator. So we haven't got an approved PPR, a project proposal report for this project. So it wasn't sort of at a stage where it's going to tender or things like that. This will give us the time to work out the appropriate planning to take it forward with Victoria.
Can you advise the current status of the sealing of the Dandenong Ranges roads
I can,
with
Senator.
Cardinia and Yarra Ranges?
Yeah,
Council?
Senator. So we've been working closely with Council, and the outcome there will be the government's commitment is to honour all of the Sealing Local Roads projects that are under construction, underway, or have been contracted. Met with both councils earlier this week and still sort of working through to work out exactly how much that will be. But yeah, the status as being explained to councils is that we'll meet.
So
all
how are we
projects.
cutting that cheque?
So
What's
between
the proportion for Commonwealth, state, local and landholders?
So that was a fully Australian government-funded project. It was a $300 million commitment between those two councils. The discussions we've had with councils, and they're not finalised at this stage, but for both those projects, the works that either are underway or are committed to take place will be around the $40 million mark.
Sorry,
And we just-
say that again.
They'll be around the $40 million mark for both councils, for the works that are currently contracted or underway.
Yep.
And they're the discussions we're having just to work out exactly what that amount will be. They're the projects that will be delivered.
So there's 220 out of the 300 of the Commonwealth commitment that you're still negotiating with councils on how to spend that money. Is that right?
No,
Sorry,
Senator.
I heard you. Federal Commonwealth's put 300 million on the table. You've given 40 and 40 to existing projects.
That's right.
That's 80. Take away from 300. We've got 220 left. What's happening with that?
So there'll be a view to be returned to budget, Senator, because that's, I guess, the decision taken through budget by government was around the equity of those projects. We're wanting to make that funding more available through other projects, a more contestable program rather than just sort of being provided to those two councils. So it's been advised to councils that those projects that are either under construction or contracted to take place, they will continue. Future priorities won't go ahead.
Okay, and I just want to be really super clear. So for the Sealing Roads in the Dandenong Ranges, 300 was on the table to be split between two councils. They've now got 40 apiece, and essentially that 300 has been reduced to 80.
That's going to be the end result, yes, Senator.
Yep, thank you for clarifying that. Why was that project funding reduced by that amount?
It was a decision of government, but I think some of the thinking that went to that decision was around that equity piece. I guess it was looking at, I guess there's going to be similar needs for sealing roads across all councils in Australia. I think part of the thinking was $300 million for two councils was a fairly significant commitment.
Well, in discussions that I've had with rural councils, not just in Victoria, Mr Bradley, but I think you're going to be having to do a lot of work on sealing roads with state governments as a result of the flooding. Can you clarify whose job that is going to be? Because that actually has been a point of contention. I've got your minister saying it's Murray Watt's problem and going to be dealt with through the DRFA, disaster recovery arrangements. And having been in that role, I'm pretty confident you can't use the DRFA in the way local councils and mayors would like it to be used, particularly if you haven't been declared a disaster zone, you've just had a lot of rain. Where is that sealing of roads, and as you're saying, this type of project, that the sealing of roads in Dandenong Ranges, are you guys going to be doing that, or is it going to be DRFA?
Well, Senator, as you've just outlined, disaster response is a matter for DRFA, so that would be disaster declared areas and flood responses where you've had roads, bridges washed away. Where there's been a lot of rain and there are potholes, that's actually an issue for the local council or the state government in the first instance as the asset owner. We don't own those assets. Should there be a proposal put to the government to consider those things, that would naturally be housed in this portfolio.
So has New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania or Victorian governments come to the Commonwealth Government for assistance in the degradation of roads as a result of torrential rains this season?
There's no proposal that I've seen, Senator, but we're certainly in discussion with them, and anybody driving on regional roads knows that there's been substantial rain damage, and not just regional roads, city roads as well.
No, exactly. So when you say you're in discussions, what does that mean?
It means when we're talking to them in any number of
They
forums.
say the roads are really bad.
Yeah, they say I drove to Canberra via, some regional roads around Cowra, and there are a lot of potholes, which, I'll drive up there and I see the same thing.
Yeah, no.
So that's the stage at which we're at, which is just...
But no
we
formal
know that there's an issue there.
proposal. Okay. Was the decision to reduce the funding to Cardinia and Yarra Ranges councils put put to the department or the government by the Victorian government?
These projects aren't funded through the Victorian Department. They're
So there was
council
no
projects.
request to say we'd rather that 220 spent elsewhere in Victoria?
As I say, weren't discussions with these projects aren't run through.
No,
through the
I
Victorian government.
understand.
Yeah.
You've cut 220, so I'm just wondering, was that as a result of discussions you'd had with the Victorian government?
I think that probably goes back to Mr Helena's point about the budget deliberations, but there weren't discussions around these projects with
Okay.
Victorian because they're not Victorian government projects.
Is the department aware that landowners were contributing a special rate and charge scheme to contribute to the roadworks locally?
I'm aware of that, Senator, yes.
Could you just explain a little bit more of what that looked like?
So my understanding is, Senator, that where there is a desire for landowners to have a local road sealed to their driveways, they would take part in the special charges scheme. I understand they would make a contribution over time of around $7,000. So council, I think, would take a loan or upfront that payment of the $7,000, and that would be recouped over time from the landowners. In our discussions with both Gdynia and Yarra, we've made sure that the projects that will proceed, it's not going to leave any landowners who have made a contribution through that special charging scheme out of pocket.
Great.
We're not
So
looking to
given
take away.
it's been cut by 220,
Yeah.
Senator
it's
Will-
only the landowners that are going to be the beneficiaries of the 80 that will be contributing to this scheme locally.
Senator, I think to give you some more precision on that 300 to 80 number, we might just come back to you with some calculations. I've just been asked to confirm that number.
Thank you. Just on the future priorities of the ROSI, at estimates last week, funding reductions for the Victorian ROSI programs totalled $186 million over the forwards. However, the reduction to the Victorian ROSI over the forwards is 248, according to budget paper 3. Can you advise the remaining Victorian ROSI projects with their funding reduced over the forwards that add up to the 248? I'm just trying to make the numbers add up.
Yeah, so in order to make those numbers make up, I think it's looking at the March budget paper 3. It showed a figure of $421.5 million for Victorian ROSI over the forward estimates. That excludes payments in the 21-22 financial year. If you contrast that against the October budget payments, which shows a figure of 173.1 for the same period, that arrives at that difference of 248.4. Now, in terms of that figure, that includes some projects that have moved into the forward estimates and others that have moved out. So there's about $115 million of funding that's been moved out of the 6 ROSI corridors that we discussed last week.
Yep.
There's $24.4 million worth of funding that's been brought forward into standalone and Pacific and projects underneath those corridors. And there's been a movement of 158.4 out of the McCoy roundabout, which is a standalone project.
Sorry, the McCoy.
McCoy roundabout.
Is that just outside of Wodonga?
It is, Senator. It's a project. It's quite similar to.
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah, it's similar to Shepparton Bypass in terms of Victoria's done the planning work on that project at the moment, and the proposal we've seen has shown that it'll probably need twice as much money as what's been provided, the commitment that's already made in budget. So it's going to need significantly more money. So there's been a movement of fund then to allow us again to work out the best delivery strategy for that project, given that it's a little bit underfunded at the moment.
Okay, I just want to go to South Australians. We just want to confirm what 3 of those projects are. You confirmed at last estimates there were 4 major projects where there's been deferral of funding. We know one's the North-South Corridor. Is one the I can't pronounce it,
Truro bypass.
T-R-U-R-O, but Ty Road bypass. So the 4 major South Australian project deferrals, one was the North-South Corridor. Can you please confirm the other 3 major projects and how much has been deferred?
So the changeover of the forward estimates for the other 3 projects would be the South Australian future priorities for it was actually a line item, this is the Urban Congestion Fund that's been moved out, obviously in line with
What
government's
sort of things were
commitments
funded under that in South Australia?
there. In South Australia, I think it included projects like, so the completed projects under there were Goodwood, Springbank and Dawes Road intersection upgrade. There was Main North Road, Kings Road, McIntyre Road intersections. But they're committed projects. The funding that's been deferred out of there was funding for future priorities. So they would have been...
So the three major projects, and
Yep.
how much has been deferred?
Yeah, so there's 58.3 out of that the future priorities. The Handorf Township improvements and access upgrade, there's been 45.5 million deferred out of the forward estimates.
And when's that going to land then?
So the profile for that now is there will be 22.4 million in 22-23,
Yep.
40.8 in 23-24, 48 in 24-25. And 40.8 in 25-26 and 48 in 2026-27.
Have you received a final project proposal from South Australia?
For Handorf, we haven't sent it, no.
Right. How far away is that?
We're expecting it fairly soon.
Is it going to be an early Christmas present, Mr. Bradley? Is it summer
Look, it'd be nice
fun?
if it was, but a little bit, that's up to the South Australian Department, I suppose. I know they're working through doing a fair bit of community consultation around that project.
Can you, for the Tyro, can you confirm if there's been deferral of the funding of this project?
It's not one of the top ones on the list, but I'll tell you that it is. So the Truro bypass, the profile I have for that is in 22-23, there's 10.75.
Yeah.
23-24, there's 57.6. 24-25, there's 64 million, and 25-26, there is 29.25. I think that's, I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure that's a consistent bypass, a consistent profile to what we had in March.
Yeah, if you could just check that. That was supposed to commence like now, late 22.
Mr Marsh is telling me that's a 1.6 increase into the forward estimate, so
Yep.
I think that would have reflected a payment that we might not have made last year that's just moved forward.
Yes. It's supposed to start late 22 and finish in 26.
Yep.
Have you been advised of any reasons for delays for this project?
So the project proposal report, we're still expecting it to receive it this year. I think the South Australian Department is still working with the community there to release a preferred alignment for the project. The project will complement works being undertaken as part of the Renmark to Gawler Roads of Strategic Importance corridor.
So when are we, if the plan was to commence at late 22,
Yeah.
when are we planning to commence it now?
So the dates that I have here from South Australia is they're still hopeful of commencing construction in December 22, but I think those timelines are certainly getting a little bit tight in terms of giving
Well,
us time to
very.
assess it. But
Very tight.
I'd anticipate that we'd hope to see that one progress early in the new year.
Thank you. The North-South Corridor, can you please outline when the South Australian Government first advised that this project was to be delayed?
So we haven't received formal advice on that. Like we're expecting that will be the case, but with the change of government in South Australia, they undertook a review at that stage to look at the costings, the design, the procurement approach and the community consultation. We're expecting that review to be completed before the end of this year, and recent discussions with South Australia suggest that's imminent.
And are you anticipating changes to project scope?
I think we'll just have to wait and see what South Australia come back with the review. I don't think it's been through South Australian Cabinet yet, Senator.
So you haven't received the final project, you're waiting for that review
That's
to
correct.
occur. Flurio Connections Project, Victor Harbour Road.
Yes.
It's actually been rolled into a broader project, the Connections Project.
Other way around, Senator. The Victor Harbour Road has been rolled into the Flurio Connections project.
Yes. So when did that occur, and has there been any changes to the $12 million funding to this project and the expected finish date of late 22?
Believe it was in MyIFO 21-22
Yep.
that project came about, where they were combined in. In terms of changes to the profiles of that project, there's been sort of some minimal movement, some ons and offs. In 22-23, at the March budget, there would have been 90.2. That's actually been increased by 10.6. Our allocation through October is 100.8. So same sort of quantity then, that moved at 40 a year. I think previously for 23-24 there was 81.9 profiled. That's gone to 71.2, so a movement out of 10.7. For 2024-25 there was 22.5, there's now 39.9, so that's an increase of 17.4. And in 25-26 there wasn't anything previously profiled, but there's now 9.7, so minor ons and offs either way.
So given this was expected to finish late 22, when are we expecting it to finish now?
Senator, I've got the completion date for this project as mid-2024, given
Right.
that it's going to bring in
Is that for the whole Connections project?
That's for the whole Fluidite
Or what about the
connections.
Victor Harbour Road piece?
I don't have that actually spelled out individually, so I might take that on notice as to when that component of the
Okay,
project
thank you. I want to talk about regional airport screening. You
don't
probably
think that's
can't
me,
help me
Senator.
with
I
that,
think
Mr
I
Bradley,
can't help
but
you with that one.
someone will be able to.
Just before we swap seats, Senator, the ceiling Dandenong Road, so just like to update, it wasn't 300 to 80, it's 300 to 153.5. So the reduction is not 220, the reduction is 146.5.
So how
just to
much
clarify.
is Yarra and Cardinia Council getting a piece out of that money?
We can take that on notice and split it. That'll come down to what the current commitments are on the books for each council, and we can come back to you with it.
Yes, today would be great.
Well, they're the discussions we're having with Council, Senator. We're expecting it'll fall around that 40 each. So that's
Right,
what,
yes,
but
got
those
it.
discussions are ongoing. That's sort of, I suppose, the discrepancy between those two numbers.
Thanks, Mr Bradley. Regional Airport Screening Infrastructure Program on behalf of the fabulous member for Grey, Rowan Ramsey. So, good to see you, Ms Purvis-Smith. Can the department advise if there's been any changes to the Regional Airport Screening Infrastructure Program guidelines, the operation of the program, or its budget since 22nd of May this year?
I'm Marisa Purvis-Smith, Deputy Secretary Transport Group, Senator. I can inform you that the program itself is a $94.5 million program. That's the same as it was previously. It was additional funding of $28.5 million over 2 years was allocated in the program as part of the March
budget? Yep.
And that remains.
Right. And has the profiling of that 94 changed over the forwards?
My colleague, Mr. Vincent, might be able to help us over the profiling. The way that I might mention though, the way the program works is that it depends on when airports expend their money, and each airport expends it at different timeframes.
Yes.
So the timing will change depending on how
Demand.
each
Yep.
airport is going. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I'm
if there
assuming
was
you will have had a
profile.
little bit of thinking. You're not walking into a black box on that one.
That's right, although we are talking to the airports all of the time, and
exactly.
they do change. It is kind of quite
That's okay.
a dynamic environment.
Mr Vincent.
Ben Vincent, Assistant Secretary, Domestic Policy and Programs Branch. Sorry, Senator, your question was about the profile of the funding for the program. Yes, there was a movement of funds of $18 million from 21-22 to 22-23.
Yep.
Would you like the profile for the program?
I've just been told that there was $94 million in this program. An additional 28 was delivered in March. I want the profiling of that over the forward estimates, please.
No problem, Senator. So that 94.5, a breakdown over the life of the program. In 2020-21, there was $23.442 million expended.
Yep.
In 2021-22, $26.9 million expended. And then in 22-23, this financial year, the profile for the budget for the program is $44.154 million, creating a total of $94.5 million for the life of the program.
Okay, and so the program is anticipated to not be extended post this financial year?
That will be a decision of government. At the moment, the program finishes on the 30 June 2023, as it was previously, and we're working with airports as to when we think the money might be expended.
Are you confident that we'll get it all out the door, given you're in conversations with regional airports?
Oh, it changes all the time, and
Yep.
some airports actually expend their money before others, so it will depend. We have contracted. I think we've contracted 36 in place with 36 airports, so we are working with that. We think,
Out of a total of how many?
I think there are only 2 who are yet to accept. One's just accepted. So one.
Which one's that one?
That I don't have with me. Mr.
So,
My
Senator,
colleague might have that
with
information.
this program,
might know.
we generally don't provide too much in the way of detail of individual grantees on the basis of security concerns. It is right that...
Mr Vincent, it's Senate estimates. It's okay. It's probably a Liberal or a National MP knows where this airport is. I don't, and I'm asking you the question.
So we will take that
We
on
can
notice.
take that on notice. So what we do is the Department of Home Affairs does
It's
not
okay.
like
I
us
have
to-
limited time. So what funding is allocated to support regional airports to install security screening assets to meet the requirements of the Australian government?
So under the RASI program, Senator, of that budget of $94.5 million, $50.2 million has been allocated to CAPEX. That is in addition to programs offered by the Department of Home Affairs.
Yep. So of that 52, is that all the screening service that's what that money gets spent on?
That money is to support the cost of the minimum necessary capital works required to accommodate enhanced security screening requirements.
Okay. Any money to maintain the security screening?
The program also provides a contribution towards initial operating costs.
But not ongoing.
The program is in place until 30 June 2023.
So we've paid them to set up all these screening assets. We've supported them to do that. And then they have to staff it and run it themselves post this financial year. Is that the plan?
The program.
So, can I just, sorry, Senator Mackenzie, as you know, that the 94.5 was set up as a COVID-19, as I understand it, part of COVID-19 support measures, but ongoing and to provide some certainty to regional airport screening, security screening costs. That will be considered through the aviation white paper and which is led by the Home Affairs review as well.
So when's the aviation white paper going to be handed down?
The aviation white paper terms of reference are being finalised as we speak. The timeline is that a white paper would usually take between 12, 18 months
Yes.
to do. The Department of Home Affairs is the lead in terms of airport security. There was a review.
No, they put the burden on and then they don't pay for it, as I recall.
They are undertaking
Part of
a
the
review of security arrangements and at a holistic level, and my understanding is that is still being considered.
So the white paper will take 18 months. Terms of reference might come out early next year. Away we go. We're not looking at having any action around the white paper till, 23, end of 24 at the earliest. So we've got a big gap, Assistant Minister, in regional airport security funding.
There is two. There's the review by Department of Home Affairs, which is
they won't pay
looking
for
at
it.
solutions. And this, of course, this was a measure that was due to finish in June 2023. It has an end date, and the government is considering these issues to provide certainty over the longer term and to regional airport security screening costs.
So does the department have an estimate of the cost of providing and maintaining airport security screening services at regional airports on either a per flight and or per passenger basis? How do we cut the money?
I don't think we do, Senator. What we do know is that it varies by airport as well, because when we're going to contract with the airports, and also it depends on the airport. We don't provide this to all airports, so I'm not sure that we have. My colleague.
How do you determine how much an airport needs?
So certainly, Senator, the RASI program was informed by initial applications and then by participants' claims over time. It was established in 2020 at a time when lockdowns were reducing the number of passengers travelling through airports. I will say in terms of the data, so we've got some information on claims data. We're working through it. It's perhaps not a robust data set as yet. It can be, in terms of the funding we pay for, we interrogate that fairly closely, but in terms of broader funding about total security costs, it gets a bit murky.
Oh, wow.
Depending on claimants' data around, there have been examples where we've had to take out car park costs from some of the data provided to us. Home Affairs remains probably best placed to talk about the longer term operation of the security screening framework.
So the level of security screening services required by a regional airport isn't determined by how many flights or passengers are having to go through that particular system.
The commercial norm is that security screening costs are passed on to airlines and ultimately on to passengers, yes. In terms of what that cost will be, there'll be a variety of factors. There'll be contracting arrangements between airports and security providers. There'll be questions around volume of
Well, the problem
passengers.
for the regional airports is, though, we can't even get Virgin, Rex and Qantas to drop off at the regional airports at a price that passengers can afford. So, but you're saying, well, that we're just going to pass that on. Is that how the system works?
In terms of questions about the security screening framework,
Okay.
Home Affairs is best placed.
Sure, I'll follow up with them. Has the department or minister responded to the letter of the 21st of October from Whyalla City Council regarding the future of screening services at Whyalla Airport and the risk of cessation of that uneconomical service will actually result in the loss of Rex and Qantas services to and from Whyalla?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
I'm
Ms.
not
Pat-
aware whether the minister has responded to the letter.
Has the department received the letter?
We have received.
Have you drafted a response for the minister and sent it up?
I'm not sure. I'd have to take that on notice.
I think there'll be a Coro list somewhere that will have that data.
And I don't
And
have
it-
it to hand, Senator.
Well, I
Rose.
don't want to wait
apologise.
till the 16th of December to get that answer,
We can see what
because
we
this
can
is
do.
an urgent problem in Whyalla
We
now.
We can see what we can do,
Can we
Senator.
search the Coro record, please?
I might also add on Whyalla, Minister, is that we are talking to Whyalla all the time. We are in open conversations
Okay.
with Whyalla, so it doesn't just rely on us responding by letter. In relation to their contract, we are very aware of their issues and are talking to them about what's left in relation to.
So what
to
issues have
dollars.
they directly raised with the
So,
department?
in exactly the issues that they've put in their letter in terms
I don't
of...
have a copy of the letter.
So some of the issues are around their ongoing expenses, but as you are aware, this is a time-limited program. They also have particular contract arrangements, which I won't go into because of potential commerciality
Are
issues.
you claiming public interest immunity on that?
I wouldn't want to divulge what Whyalla has entered into in a contract we have access to commercial material in the contracts that we have access to in relation to the regional airlines, but we are talking to them about what areas they can look at. I also know that they are in contact with the Department of Home Affairs and to see whether there's anything the Department of Home Affairs can do as well.
So other than Whyalla, are you aware of any other regional airports in your discussions that are concerned about being unable to maintain the expensive screening requirements?
I think Whyalla might be, well, we're in contact with all of the airports that we provide that are part of the program. It depends on the contracts and the commercial arrangements each of the airports have entered into with their security and for their operational expenses, and they do differ. And so what we do is we try to provide information that might help without divulging commercial in confidence material to help. So we are in contact with all of the airports.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Supplementary question. So it was quite common, in fact, wasn't it, that in regional airports there was no screening in the past. So they did not have screening at all, and that the screening would happen at the capital city airport if people were going further. And this program that we're discussing and screening was actually introduced by the former government. Is that correct?
It is my understanding that there wasn't screening to this extent, and then the Department of Home Affairs, I understand, did a review of security arrangements, and they are responsible for security in airports and made decisions on which airports, further airports they thought needed additional security arrangements, and that did occur in 2020.
And so there's a series
Actually,
of
2018.
there's a series of regional airports. Let's take, and I'm going to see if I can pronounce it correctly, Albany, which I was at 2 weeks ago. That doesn't have any screening whatsoever. So there's bunches of regional airports which under the former government's program did not get any screening at all. Is that correct?
That is a matter for the Department of Home Affairs in the sense that not all regional airports are required to have the upgraded screening.
Yep.
Decisions were made by the Department of Home Affairs based on security risk of particular airports and regional airports that needed upgraded security.
That's right. So the short-term funding that was to expire at the end of June was a COVID measure, and as I understand it, what the Minister has said is it's being extended slightly to assess what the current situation is. Am I summarising it correctly?
I think that's correct, Senator. It was a temporary measure. It was introduced during COVID because planes, obviously, there was no aircraft and aviation travel. It was to assist capital expenditure and operational expenditure in a time-limited way. And there was a top-up in the March budget, which this budget kept, and the government has kept that. It is a time, and it is due to end in June 2023.
Thank you.
The incoming government brief states that the department is working, and I'm quoting, with Home Affairs to consider long-term support options for sustainable security screening at regional airports. What is the timetable for that work?
That also combines into the review that the Department of Home Affairs have undertaken, and so...
So when's that review due, the Home Affairs reviews?
I think that would be best.
But you're working with them?
We're working with them, but again...
You're going to have to fund it. When does the review... Is the review
that's
completed?
being considered by the Department of Home Affairs and their Minister.
So you don't know?
I'm not aware of the timeframe.
Okay. So is one of the topics being discussed in the longer term support options for a sustainable security screening at regional airports? And this isn't the Home Affairs incoming brief, it's yours. So is one of the options being considered long-term operational funding?
We're looking at all options in terms of when we're working with Home
Including
Affairs.
operational funding?
Well, I'm not, we haven't got to that stage, I think.
When did they start the review then? Mr Vincent, when did they start the review?
The then Minister for Home Affairs appointed Ms Kerry Hartland to lead an independent review, including engagement with industry representatives, and provide recommendations for targeted deregulatory initiatives.
When?
Yes. Sorry, it's not not being my port.
We'll see if I can find out.
Yeah, that'd be great. And, you know, give someone a call. Yeah, go for it.
Just on this topic, just refreshing my memory, there was a review done by your department, then the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Regional Development. There is a version of it on your website. It's titled Passenger Security Screening Enhancements Case Studies of Financial Impacts at 6 Regional Airports. This particular one is dated December 2019. I can distinctly remember seeing this document, but I'm not sure if it was made public or not. Do people remember that at the table, the case studies at 6 regional airports?
It's before my time, Senator.
Right. Well, in that document it does say, there's a lot redacted. This is obviously probably an FOI or some such. Yeah, it was. There is a lot of redactions, but in one element of it does say that the cost at the Whyalla Airport will increase of these security arrangements. The review is into the security arrangements we're talking about. It would increase cost by $69 per passenger. Is that familiar, that figure, or have you do updated figures on how much it costs Whyalla per passenger?
I don't have that level of detail, Senator. We can take that on notice if you like.
Mr Vincent, do you have that level of detail?
That is before my time as well, I'm sorry.
Is it in your folder?
But even if it was before your time, obviously calculations were done by this department. We're talking less than 3 years ago, or roughly 3 years ago now. And we're still talking about the impacts of these issues. So I'm just surprised that you don't have, whether you don't know about that figure, what is the cost at the Whyalla Airport per passenger of these changes?
I would need to take that on notice, Senator.
Do you have a figure?
I would need to take that on notice.
No, well, I'm just, okay, I'm asking, in your head right now, do you know if there is a figure somewhere in the department, someone has calculated the cost per passenger at the Whyalla Airport of these changes?
I would have to take that on
You
notice.
have to take on notice on what's in your
I do not have
head.
a figure in my head.
You have to take,
No.
you can't. It's yes or no, and I'm surprised you can't.
I
mean, why I'm surprised here is this obviously is having a huge impact on some
Yeah.
regional airports. There has been work commissioned by your department on it. I'm surprised you don't know that work, given it's the area you're working in. I would have thought you would have, even if it was before your time, you would have read the report. It's not that lengthy. And it goes to the great relevance here of what we're talking about. And I'm just a bit surprised that these calculations are not being done, because also in this report from where I'm from, Rockhampton was also one of the 6. Now, the figures on Rockhampton seem to be redacted in this FOI request, but I remember it being a substantial amount of money impact on the Rockhampton Airport as well. And the big issue I've got here is that we're providing greater security for all Australians, but it seems to be the cost of these changes are being disproportionately felt by those who live outside capital cities. Are you doing any work on that at the moment, on a per person basis and per passenger basis? What do these costs look like of greater security arrangements in regional areas compared to capital cities?
I think Mr Vincent has outlined the data that we're collecting, and that's part of how we get a better handle on as we get the data from the airports that they provide us with. But as he's mentioned, some of the data that has been collected was provided during COVID, which is not a normal state of affairs. The other issues is it depends on different airports that are in the program have provided different information in the data. So we're going through the data to try to make it consistent. And as Mr Vincent mentioned, for example, expenses on car parks is not something that we include in that operational expenses. So we are doing work, but we are trying to make the data that we're being provided with consistent so that we can get a consistent set of information.
Okay, can I just get an indication though that you understand where I'm coming from and that this is an issue, that what I'm saying is that there are fixed costs, there are overhead costs associated with putting in these extra security requirements. At a regional airport, obviously the passenger numbers are going to be much lower than a capital city. Now, obviously there'll be some threshold points where the capital city airport has to put in 2 different screenings and more, but the basic point here is that there'll be economies of scale almost certainly, and the average cost of implementing these changes will be, on balance, you'd think, much lower at a busier airport compared to a less busy airport. And I'm just asking, are those things being considered by the department, especially given the overall aim here is to provide security and safety to all Australians? You know, the people at Rocky don't get extra safety out of it or anything. Are these issues being considered? Because it does seem an unfair impact on those that live in less populated areas of the country.
Yep, Senator, I do understand where you're coming from and the issues that you are raising, and we are looking at all of those issues.
Okay,
And
thank
as
you.
you know, Senator, it was a COVID-19 pandemic measure, one put in place by the previous government that had a...
That's not actually, so I just might...
Yes, I haven't finished.
Maybe I'll just
Sorry.
clarify though what I'm asking about. It's got nothing to do with COVID, what I'm talking about.
But I've already indicated there's this measure was due to finish in June 2023 and with no other measures or suggestions put in place.
Sorry, Senator,
And
I wasn't actually asking about that measure. Sorry, I just thought I might clarify. I wasn't asking about that measure. I was asking about the decision to enhance security arrangements at airport, which was made pre-COVID. The decision to do that was
That's
made
right.
pre-COVID, and I'm not being partisan here. The coalition government made this decision. I'm not arguing against the decision. We do need to have proper security at airports. All the point I'm making, so it's got nothing to do with COVID, although obviously COVID would and has perhaps impacted the data that's been able to be collected on the changes. But the issues here are providing those security arrangements. I think we should consider it being equally shared, the cost equally shared across all Australians, not disproportionately. That's the only point I'm making, and I'm not making. It's not a partisan comment. It's something I'm doing on behalf of the country people I represent. So don't have to get political about it, but yeah, I'm glad to hear the department is considering these issues. Thank you.
Why isn't getting consistent data a function of the contractual arrangements you enter into with these airports, Mr Vincent?
Pardon me? Sorry, the...
Well, the evidence you just gave earlier was it's all a bit ropey, the data, what you're getting from different airports, etc. Why isn't getting consistent data that would assist the department making, and ministers, I might add, making good policy decisions, part of the functions of your contractual arrangements with the 36 airports?
It is, Senator. Certainly we pay
So why is it
in
ropey?
arrears.
Excuse me, sorry, can I just come in? And I encourage everyone to ask questions, but can we just let, when the question is asked, can we let the officials answer it? And I don't intend to interfere, but I don't want to get into a situation where we were a couple of set of estimates ago where there was screaming across the table. So we can just keep it going the way it's been going this morning would be helpful.
Of course, Chair.
So
I'll
you
be
have been
very
asked a question, Mr Vincent, so we'll let you answer, and then Senator Mackenzie will come back to you.
Certainly, in terms of the data we get, it can be, in your words, a bit ropey. It comes in late occasionally. Airports have been very busy with the recovery. We do observe that there are differences between similar-sized airports in the charges the costs they are incurring, and it's not always clear exactly why. Maybe contractual. And then there's a data cleansing element as well. So that's part of the challenge we're working through at the moment, Senator.
Okay, I want to go to Lurky, the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Grants Program. On the 7th of November, Mr Hallinan, you gave evidence about the genesis of the program. It was originally intended as a stimulus program supporting local councils to invest in relatively small community infrastructure. Could I seek to further clarify the purpose of this program? Is it fair to say it was intended to help local governments invest in enhancements or new community infrastructure and roads?
I think that would be fair within the parameters of the program guidelines, which we can table for you, or we can take a notice and give you the actual guidelines for the program itself, Senator. I think they're publicly available.
And it goes to probably an earlier series of questions. I think you said it's certainly not a flood response program when I was trying to work out how we fix all our potholes.
Yeah, well, certainly the potholes I don't think are flood related. I think they're rain related, or certainly asset maintenance related. We'd been having a discussion, I think, about flood response roads, which we traversed earlier as well, which is really a response to disaster relief and recovery, which is another portfolio's responsibility.
Yes, I understand that. So is the department aware that Minister King, and hence my confusion on this topic, has responded to media queries about road degradation and potholes and damage by floods and rain by saying that, to the effect that councils are receiving assistance through the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Funding Program to address that?
Yes, we're aware of that. So certainly there's funding available through LRCI that could be put to road upgrades, road safety upgrades, that could be used by councils within the guidelines for that purpose. Yes.
So you haven't had to change the guidelines in response to the torrential rain? Just hold your horses. I'm not going to interrupt you and you're not going to interrupt me. Any change of the guidelines or the purpose of the program since since the 7th of November?
Ben Maher, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Infrastructure Investment Division. No, Senator. The guidelines are broad. There have been no amendments. Okay,
thank you. So while we're on floods, has the department assessed or estimated the total cost to repair roads, national, state and local, which have been impacted by the floods and heavy rains?
No, Senator.
Is anyone across government doing that work?
Senator,
you know of?
the roads are owned by states and local councils, and asset maintenance of those roads is the responsibility of the owners of those roads. Should there be a proposal or a program proposed by somebody to assist with that asset maintenance or in response to the heavy rains over the last couple of years, that'd be something we would look at. But as we don't own the roads and we don't have information on the state of those assets, it's not something that we're well placed to do, Senator.
Okay. For this program, can you update the committee on expenditure to date?
Through the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program? Yep.
I'll just find that information, Senator.
While you're doing that, Mr. Maher, is that a long process? Because Senator McKenzie might want to have some other questions so we don't waste too much time.
It might take me a minute, Senator.
Senator McKenzie, did you want to follow up with Mr. Hallinan on anything else, or are you happy to wait?
Well, I'll just... the expenditure to date, the number of councils who've signed grant agreements, the number of projects completed and the number of projects underway. Mr. Maher, if you could get that for me, and I'll continue with Mr. Hallinan or Mr. Betts. Okay. The former government committed $500 million to Phase 3 extension, and prior to the election, the department released a breakdown of this funding per electorate. Can you advise whether each council was informed of their allocation under that extension?
Senator, if I may, I did find the information you were asking for. Would you like that response?
Sure.
As at the information I have before me is as at the 10th of October, Senator. Across phases 1, 2 and 3, over 9,400 projects were approved, with over $2.48 billion in investment by the Commonwealth.
How many councils have signed grant agreements?
For which phase, Senator?
The money you just talked about.
So that was phases 1, 2 and 3.
Yep.
So there would be separate
So
agreements for each
can I have
each
them
phase.
by phase then? How many grant agreements have been signed with councils?
I don't have that information before me, Senator. But
Do you have the number of projects completed by phase?
Yes, I just provided that information. Oh, sorry, by phase, Senator. I provided that at the aggregate level. Apologies.
Senator, the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, every project for that, I think, was provided in response to Senator Canavan's letter before our first session or second session for this committee. I'm just opening that. It's 413 pages of information, so there's a... we can try to go through the top level stuff there, but there's a detailed response with the committee.
Okay. Can you, for the phase 3, $500 million, can you advise whether each council was informed of their allocation under that extension?
Senator, I can confirm that 100% of councils have returned an executed grant agreement for phase 3. That grant agreement would have included the allocation amount, but I can confirm that on notice.
Okay, so when you say 100%, how many?
550, Senator.
Thank you. Can you advise if applications from council had been made under the extension? Yes, you have. The list of applications. And is that phase 3 proper or phase 3 extension?
That's phase 3 proper, to use your terminology,
Yes.
Senator.
Well, can you tell me about my specific question? The $500 million was for phase 3 extension.
Phase 3 extension is a term used by the former government, Senator.
Yes.
It has not
so
been...
the $500 million?
Yes, if I may continue.
Yeah, go for it.
That money was affirmed in the October budget with an additional $250 million, Senator. So that pool is being implemented as a $750 million new phase 4, if you will, Senator, with delivery from July next year. Grant agreements have not been sent out yet for that phase.
Right, so for the extension phase 3, grant agreements haven't been, but have councils been informed of their allocation under the extension?
For phase 4, Senator, if you will indulge me, if that's what we're talking about, the additional
Well, your phase 4 is my phase 3 extension,
Okay.
yes?
I believe so, Senator.
I think
except
so, with an additional 250.
Correct, Senator.
Right.
So
we're
the answer to your
talking
question
apples.
is no, Senator.
Right, so they don't know their allocation, and we haven't got any grant agreements or any applications in?
Correct, Senator.
Right. When are we expecting them to get that information?
Senator, I can't give you a precise timeline. I can say that we are working with government on implementation arrangements. The funding is only available for expenditure from 1 July 2023, so we are 7 months out from that. But I would expect that would happen in the early in the new year.
So councils, though, before the redesign of this phase, councils did know their allocation under what used to be called the phase 3 extension.
I'm sorry, Senator, I just have to turn my mind back to
It's only
before
6
the
months
October
ago.
budget.
Yeah.
I'd have to take on notice whether or not there was communication with councils in respect of phase 3 extension, as it was known at that time. I believe there was communication.
Yeah, so councils knew what they were getting allocated?
As I said, Senator, I believe so, but I'd need to take that
Well,
on notice to confirm.
I can help you.
Thank you.
Because the Griffith, I think it's Griffith Council, under their, on page 139 of their delivery program and operational plan, talks about their special rate variation for council's determination and actually quote the local roads and community infrastructure program phase 3 extension and the funding that's going to, how they're going to use that money on their local roads. So what communication has been had from the department or the government with these councils who have planned, thanks to getting the allocation from government and the department about how much they're able to use under this program, they've put it into their operational plans, tendering, etc. What communication have you had with those councils? What has the department told them?
Senator, so I would need to take that on notice. There have been public announcements in the March budget in respect of the money that was approved, including that additional $250 million. That combined $750 million will be implemented through a new phase. But as I said, for implementation or expenditure from July next year, and we're working through the detail of what that looks like. Councils will then be advised of their allocations.
Well, I might be able to help you. There is a document that I have off your website that actually has all the councils and their allocation.
In respect of phase 4, Senator?
Phase 3 extension funding allocations, Mr Maher. I think I'm trying to be really clear what the concern of local councils is. They were told they had an allocation under this program funding. They've planned on what local roads and community infrastructure they're going to spend it on. Change of government, redesign of program, but I'm not hearing that we've communicated with these local councils in any way about the allocation that they've actually been working through locally to deliver on.
As I said, Senator, we're working through how that combined $750 million would be implemented.
Mr Hallinan, has the department contacted the councils that are listed under the phase 3 extension
Mr Maher's taken that question on notice already, Senator.
program? So the department hasn't contacted that?
No, we've taken the question on notice, Senator. We'll just
This is a
confirm.
new question. Has the department contacted the councils and told them their allocation's changing?
Mr Maher took on notice the question of communications with councils about phase 3 extension or phase 4 in the discussions earlier, and I'm just confirming we've taken that on notice, and we'll confirm what communications have been had with councils.
It's been more than a month since the budget's come down, since you've announced the phase 4, the additional funding. I find it you haven't worked out how you're going to spend it yet, but there are actual local governments who have been through planning processes internally based on a previous commitment from the department. Can you guarantee, Mr Betts, that no council will have their funding reduced to what it was announced allocated in the phase 3 extension under the former government? Can we just commit that at least?
It's ultimately a policy decision for the government, Senator, and not something that the department can provide a guarantee on. It's not something that we would anticipate as a substantial risk, though.
Because that would be a substantial risk, given it's in their operational planning documents, based on a commitment. But you can't actually guarantee that.
No, we're working on implementing the government's budget commitment through the October budget, Senator.
And
that will
that
involve
could be 7 months
communications with
away.
councils. That's
what
great.
Mr Maher just said.
Yes.
Are there any plans, Assistant Minister, now that you've heard this, to actually communicate with the councils who've rightfully done the right thing by their ratepayers and being quite public in how they're going to use the money, etc., etc. Do you think the department or the government should actually communicate with these local councils? I could read out the ones from Tasmania if you like.
Probably
That's why I'm asking the Assistant Minister,
So-
Chair.
My
What I
apologies.
can say, after listening to the department, it appears that work is underway. But I also would say that the Albanese Labor government and Labor governments, former Labor governments, have always enjoyed a good relationship with local councils, and we've taken steps to ensure that their voices are heard in many, many forums within government, and we treat them with respect.
Okay, so the Break a Day Council was told that they were allocated $647,406,000. Brighton Council in Tasmania, $249,567,000. The City of Burnie was told they were allocated $484,186,000 under this program. Central Coast Council, $771,586,000. Central Highlands Council, Central Highlands were getting $589,128,000. Circular Head Council in Tasmania, $803,241,000. Your home city, Senator Brown, Hobart City Council was getting $685,131,000 under this program. I'm assuming you would be as concerned as anyone that your local councils who'd been allocated this funding and it had been budgeted for, they will have put it into their planning for lots of local projects. Are you hoping that Minister King that guarantees that funding that your councils are already planning on?
What I can say to you, Senator Mackenzie, is that the election commitment that actually increased the amount of funding, increased it by $250 million was warmly welcomed by councils. And again, I have a very close relationship with my councils back home, and I'm sure every senator and member has a relationship with their local councils as well. And again, I'll just repeat that the Labor government is very respectful of local councils, and we listen to their views and invite them to be part of decision making within this government.
I'm just asking.
Again, I'll just say
They're making
there was
decisions.
a lot of excitement around the extra $250
And I hope the
million
allocations that they were banking on and have planned on, they don't know whether it's been changed though. Let's hope they all get an increase. But you can't even give me that guarantee that what they were planning on will be what's allocated.
What the department's already indicated, they're doing work on the program itself, and they'll be talking to local governments. But again, Senator Mackenzie, I will reiterate that it's an increase of $250 million, an election commitment that was delivered on at the October budget. And again, as I've been going around, there's only been excitement around the increase in funding, as nobody's actually raised this issue with me, but I appreciate.
Yeah, I've just got a final question. I guess the assumption from the local councils is everyone's welcoming the funding. It's a good thing. The problem is they're planning to build these projects based on the allocation, and from the evidence here today, they won't know when that money is getting to them, whether the allocation remains the same, whether it's changed, for indeed almost a year after the first allocation was announced under extension phase 3. I mean, and that leads to a lot of uncertainty at a local level. So I hope the department will actually communicate with these local governments. I'm done.
Thank you, Chair. Well done, Senator Mackenzie. Thank you. I don't want to hold everyone up, but I have to get in a mention of the Rockhampton Ring Road before we go. So I'd just like to table the latest tourism exhibit in Rockhampton. I realise, Mr Hallinan, you probably won't be visiting Rocky anytime soon, but I thought you might like to see the silos that have all been painted start Rocky Ring Road 2023. So just wanted to keep on the record that we're very keen for this to start, and anyone from the department is welcome to visit and see the need for this and the passion for this road any time they wish. Thank you very much. And with that, Chair, I don't think we have any more questions for the department. Oh, sorry. No, Senator McDonald.
For the department?
The department. Okay, sorry, Senator McDonald. I was got the wrong information.
No, I'm sorry. It was just that, good morning, everybody, but, you know, people are watching estimates from councils and places around the country, and I've had a call from the Burketown Shire Council just wanting an update on funding on the Normanton to Burketown, the Burke Development Road. And I'm just wanting to get an update on that and where the funding's up to with that, please.
We'll just see if we can get an answer for you, Senator.
Thank you. And while they're at...
Do you have a number of questions here?
No, just two,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Well, specifically the Burke Development Road and the Croydon section. That road's only been open for 4 months of this year, and the photos that I've just received are of people sliding off the road into trees, of the Kownyama community being cut off, and they're saying the potholes in the road are now up to your waist deep. The road is almost impassable. So I would like some information on how that Burke Developmental Road funding is going and how the Croydon section is going.
So the Burke Development Road and Croydon section is part of the same road? Or
Yes,
I
it's
don't
a
have
big
the information
loop,
with me,
that's
but
all right.
we should have somebody who might be able to update us.
All right, perhaps somebody will look for it while was the department going to be released otherwise? Somebody could look for that and come back to me
Yes, they
today,
will
that would be
have to
terrific.
released.
So we
That-
might be able to answer it now.
Hello, Maxine Ewens, Assistant Secretary for Queensland, Northern Territory and WA. The information I have available for the Burke Development Road, it's currently in planning and we're waiting a project proposal report to be submitted to us.
Would you mind, I'm not sure that that's current because work has been happening on that road.
Okay.
And there's been incremental announcements of forming the road, and some portions are being sealed. And then the Croydon section hasn't been touched at all, and that's the one that is now almost impassable.
Okay, I do have, so against that particular one that I said is in planning, so paid to date is 0. There is a Burke Development Road progressive ceiling, which is under construction.
Yeah.
And it's awaiting a project closure report on that one. Would it be that one?
Yes.
Possibly.
Well, could I, on notice, ask you for that project works, where that is up to, the information that you're waiting on, what that will provide in finalisation. And then I'd like to know if you have an application on the Croydon section.
Croydon.
Because I know the local member was up there, the local state member was up there last week, and the number of calls I'm getting on it now is really concerning. But for a road to only be open 4 months of the year to service communities and businesses seems, and I appreciate it'll be a state road, but I'm looking for whether or not you've received a request for support.
We will take that all on notice and come back to you with anything that we've received.
Terrific, thank you.
Chair, I just had one more question, if that's all right. Sorry. I had forgotten. There has been some reports in the last few days or this week that the government, or the overall government, is doing work and analysis on the impacts of coal-fired power station closures in regional areas. I just wondered, Mr Betts, particularly with your Net Zero group or anywhere else in the department, are you providing advice to other departments or the broader government on the regional impacts of coal-fired power station closures?
I'm going to ask David McKay, my DepSec for Regional Development, to come to the table.
Morning, Senator. Doug McKay, Deputy Secretary. Yes, Senator, as you'd expect, we're engaged with a number of other departments on those kinds of matters.
So have you provided advice in particular to the report that was leaked to the Australian this week, which showed that there would be 800 odd job losses in the Hunter region from coal-fired power station closures?
Senator, I'm not sure that I could identify the exact report that was the subject of the media article that you're referring to.
Well, just give me 1 second, I will bring it up. It was a report that was titled Estimated Impacts of CFPS, I presume it's coal-fired power shutdowns or something, estimated impacts of CFPS and associated coal mine closures, Upper Hunter. Are you not familiar with that document?
Senator, I think it's probably best if I take it on notice. I know there have been there's some work between departments that's been to inform submissions to be taken forward to Cabinet, but I'm very happy to take on notice.
Well, what I might do is I'll email, I don't have a physical copy of this, but I'll email it to the Secretary to table, if that's okay, so that'll be available to you to look at. And I'm particularly asking, have you provided any advice towards this report? I don't believe it's from your department, but have you provided any advice to it? And if so, what's the level of that analysis you provided?
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Well, thank you.
WhatsApp, all right?
Then, so, Mr. Betts, we can release the officials now from the department, and we'll call Northern Australia Infrastructure. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One more question from. I apologise.
Can I just ask one question on notice? Sorry, by my reckoning, I think we've been here on outcomes 1 and 2 over 4 days, not 4 full days. Are you able to give me an estimate or tell us precisely how many people you've had here over those 4 days waiting to give evidence, and what the approximate costs to the department would have been of them waiting and facing for these estimates? It doesn't have to be today, but if you've got a general view, and perhaps also the range of their levels of in the department. They seem to be, because they're not all in this room, they're next door too. But I would appreciate that, and also the people who were waiting here in the first couple of days who were on the program who never saw the light of day in this room. I'd appreciate some estimate about the cost.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, Mr. Betts, if you could, thank you very much to the officials. And as I said, we'll call Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. I'll just check with my colleagues. We are on track to get the other 4, okay? And I just have to say that we will finito by 12 o'clock because there's some aeroplanes to catch.
We're on track for that. So
Yep, thank you. Tremendous.
Well, relatively. 4 minutes behind our schedule. 3 minutes behind our schedule.
Actually, an hour and 3, half an hour and 3.
Well,
but what you? No, I'm not stressing at all. Yeah. And I know the Burke Development Road. I know of it because that's where the Burke and Wills Road is. Is that right?
The section north of there, north of Northington.
Oh, further up. Okay.
Yes, but you're right. That was sealed in the 70s, Senator Still. It's a beef development road project.
I did that road in about 80 something from 3 ways to Camberwell. It's atrocious. Do we lost our official? Oh, they're on the TV. Oh, sorry. I thought everyone. I thought it was something I said. Okay, well, my apologies. Okay. I now welcome representatives from Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility via video link. And gentlemen, yes, do you wish to make an opening statement?
If you don't mind, Chair, I would like a brief one.
Mr. Doyle, of course, and then I'll go to Senator McDonald. So please, Mr. Doyle, go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the activities of the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. My name is Craig Doyle, the new Chief Executive Officer of NAIF. I joined NAIF in June 2022. It's been a busy and productive first 5 months. I joined NAIF with the aim to enhance and improve on the important work of helping develop Northern Australia. I'm focused along with the board and staff of NAIF to increase the reach of NAIF's diverse mandate options while working collaboratively with the Queensland, Western Australian and Northern Territory governments. I've had the opportunity to meet the Minister of Northern Australia, the Honourable Madeleine King, several times already, and also had the opportunity to visit a number of key NAIF projects. There's been a strong focus on increasing NAIF staffing in the north, with a significant increase in the numbers in Cairns, Darwin and Perth in recent months. This includes our first investment team members ever in Cairns. A key focus of mine, we continue to work for ways to improve on our current processes and relationships with all stakeholders and ensuring NAIF is in front of mind as a finance option for projects in the north. And very quickly, Chair, at this point in time, NAIF's investment commitments stand at $3.87 billion. These projects are forecast to contribute over $28 billion of public benefit, with an approximate 7 multiplier for every NAIF dollar committed. The projects are also forecast to support more than 14,800 jobs. Of these investment commitments, NAIF has reached a contractual close on more than $2.6 billion of financings. 21 projects have now reached financial close. 10 projects are now complete and 11 are in construction phase. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Doyle. Senator McDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Mr Doyle, Mr Roper. I'm assuming that you're coming to us from Northern Australia? Oh, excellent.
Council, Senator.
Excellent, good news. I want to ask you, in the budget paper number 4, page 115 of the current budget, the NAIF appropriation is $763.47 million, but in the March budget appropriation it was $1.16 billion. By my calculations, that's $402.4 million reduction. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll have to check the numbers, but those numbers are correct, yes.
Could you explain this difference, this reduction, please?
So, Senator Matthew Roper, First Assistant Secretary, Cities and Northern Australia Division in the department. My understanding is that it represents a reprofiling of expected expenditure and drawdowns from the NAIF, rather than any overall reduction in the amount of money available to the facility. Of course, an additional $2 billion was provided in the most recent budget, and so that's just a matter of updating our estimates in terms of when we expect monies to flow.
Right, so you're saying that the $402.4 million is money that's been pushed out further in the forwards? Okay.
That's correct, Senator. That's my understanding.
Could you please provide that, the new forwards, please?
I may need to take that on notice in terms of that detail, Senator. There may be another person in the room who can assist with that. Maybe best if I can take that on notice and come back.
No, everybody else has fled, Mr Roper. It's just you on your own. You are the only person who is able to answer that question. All right, if you could take that on notice, but what I'm looking for is how I can follow the reduction that I see of the $402 million from the March budget to the October budget, please. So the two lots of profiling. Under Rewiring the Nation, will NAIF fund any Rewiring the Nation projects?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we look at each case by case for any proponent projects that come through, and transmission projects or anything, we're agnostic to any of those projects. We'll do it on a case by case as long as they meet the mandatory eligibility criteria and go through our process.
So to date, have you received any Rewiring the Nation projects applications for funding?
Yes, in our pipeline at the moment, there's a number. I'll have to just look at exactly how many that are in there relating to transmission in a couple of jurisdictions. They haven't reached investment decision stage. They're in our active inquiry or due diligence phase.
Right. Are those projects that I could get listed, please?
Yes, take it on notice.
Terrific. Thank you. On page 25 of the NAIF's 2001-2002 annual reports, it quotes an $8.4 billion total loan value for 76 projects in the pipeline across Queensland, Western Australia and the Northern Territory. How much has been allocated in the current budget for these projects?
Just to clarify, so that's our total pipeline.
Yes.
So when we reach investment decision, at the moment, investment decisions total 3.87 billion. And then between our due diligence and investment decision phase, that's the rest of the pipeline that we'd be referring to. And at the moment, it's we're assuming our KPIs for $1 billion, between 1 and 1.2 billion of investment decisions this year. As a KPI, and between 7 and 800 million of contractual close. I can clarify the differences in those two steps if you wish.
That would be great, but perhaps you'd do that on notice for me, because I've just got a few questions, but I don't want to take up all the time. Thank you. There are 25 resources projects valued at $3.4 billion in the pipeline, as per that same report, page 25. Where are these 25 projects located by region and state, please?
I can break down generally by state. By region, I have to take that on notice, I'm sorry.
Okay, well then on notice, could you provide the 25 projects located by region within the state, obviously, and I'd like the loan value for each of those projects. I'd like to know if the loan value has been adjusted since the project approval for any of those projects. So we've got a column, approved, and any adjustments. I'd like to know what's the predominant mineral or commodity in each of those projects, and your expectation as to whether each project will proceed to completion.
Yeah, thank you. Very clear. If I may, I'll just clarify, those numbers of the 24 projects are in our total pipeline, from active inquiry through to due diligence through to investment decision. So some of those columns you mentioned, Senator, the original number before it reaches investment decision hasn't been finalised. Once it's an investment decision, we are seeing now, though, at investment decision before contractual close, there is initially some changes in numbers, so we'll make sure we'll complete those ones in that table.
Yeah, thank you, because obviously what I'm looking for is to reconcile the 3.4 billion that's in the pipeline, identify the 25 projects, region and state, loan value, and I guess project value, if that's the application value, the loan value if there has been an approval, any adjustments, the predominant purpose of the project, so metal, mineral or commodity. And then I guess that last question about asking if each project will proceed to completion, that's probably going to have to be a comment because there's not going to be a way to say yes or no. Terrific, thank you. I want to do the same process with the 14 energy projects that are valued at $2.5 billion in the pipeline on page 25 of the annual report. So once again, just to be clear, region and state for each of the 14 projects, the application value, the loan value, if it's been approved, any adjustments, the predominant commodity in each of those projects, and will each project proceed to completion, that comment as well, please.
Thank
Terrific.
you.
Thank you. Okay, there is $450 million in the pipeline has been allocated to one project in emerging sectors. Could you tell me what is the emerging sector?
That particular project, it was between our due diligence and investment decision process, Senator. That has subsequently now, that party has withdrawn its request for funding and it's no longer in our pipeline. That's just recent, as in the last 4 weeks.
Okay, so can you describe what an emerging sector, what that sector is?
It could be something like carbon capture, storage. We've got a number of projects in the rare earth and critical minerals, which probably sit outside definitions of current ones that are new technology. So that's what we consider. It's not defined clearly in our processes, Senator, but it's that would be something like we'd see that as an emerging sector.
Any other thing or something like that. Perhaps if you've got a list of what the sectors are that you're currently using, and then what you broadly, what the things that have been identified that would be captured by emerging sectors, that would be useful. Thank you. Page 27 of the NAIF annual report refers to growth by investment activity. Would you please break down the growth in investment activity by quarter?
Did you say page 27 of the annual report?
I did say page 27, but of course I've not brought the report with me to confirm when I wrote that down.
It probably is less of an issue anyway. I'd probably, to that breakdown by quarter, I would not have that with me at the moment. Sorry, I'd have to take that on notice to break it down by quarter.
No worries. So could you please, on notice, provide the growth by investment activity by quarter, and in relation to the... here's one I prepared earlier. Thank you.
Just fell out of the sky.
I wanted to know, in relation to the growth by investment activity, which projects did not reach contractual close and why they didn't reach contractual close. So it sounds like you'll take that on notice as well.
I can say, Senator, depending on the period in question, if you're talking about the 12-month period that's linked to the annual report, there was no projects that had been through investment decision that did not make contractual close. There is, however, a number of projects still in that gap between investment decision and contractual close that haven't closed yet.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, well, just referring back to the report, you can see that whole section 3, growth and investment activities. So I just need that sketched out, please. In the organisational structure on page 52 of the report, you have identified that there are 3 offices based in Northern Australia and 3 offices based in southern capital cities. I'm assuming that Cairns is still the head office?
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
And Mr Doyle, you have moved to Cairns, I understand, from Mackay?
I have, yes.
Northern Australia to Northern Australia.
Mackay to Brisbane to Cairns, yes, Senator.
Well, that is terrific. That's a double win. In the outline of FTE staff, why is the greatest number of staff based in the Sydney office?
I'm sorry, we just lost the link very briefly. Sorry, Senator, if you don't mind.
I'm just asking why the greatest number of staff are based in Sydney.
The latest numbers effective from last week are now 14 staff in Sydney, 4 staff in Brisbane, 2 staff in Townsville, 16 in Cairns, 2 in Darwin and 5 in Perth. So Cairns is now the highest number of people as of last week, Senator.
I didn't realise I was asking you Dix's. This is very happy news, Mr Doyle, and I'm hoping that as roles, as you have natural attrition in the Sydney office, that those roles, I'm hoping, would be based in Northern Australia. Can I ask if that is would be a direction of yours?
Yes, so in the last 6 months, Senator, we've put our first investment team members out of Sydney into Cairns. There's now 3 in Cairns, and Perth has gone from 2 to 4.
So the remaining staff in Sydney, they're all investment analysts, are they? Yeah.
Yeah, there's one operational person that's linked to public benefit work that's linked very closely to the investment team, Senator. But yes, the predominant of the key investment staff.
That is terrific news. The numbers in these next questions that I've got have all, they're all referring to what's in the annual report, but it sounds like you've made some pretty significant move around. So could I ask then on notice if you could provide the current staffing profiles by where the staff are and the roles in each office. And can I get a breakdown of employees by gender, not English speaking background, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background, and people with disability in each of the 6 NAIF offices, please?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Obviously, the annual report was to the 30th of June. We'll provide you with the latest data to reflect the new numbers as of right now.
Terrific, thank you. Finally, I just want to ask about the NAIF board as it currently sits. How many is considered a full board?
The department. Sorry, I'll answer that. Sorry, Senator, I was just checking with my colleague. So at the moment, there's a chair and 6 board members, one of which is the ex officio from the department. I think the maximum could be 1 more. There's 1 vacancy at the moment, Senator.
Terrific, thank you. How many do you need to make the board quorate?
I would have to check the board chart, but I'm sure it's 4. I'm sure
That's
it's
correct,
4.
Senator. It is 4.
Thank you. Could I ask where each board member is geographically located?
Yes, our chair is based in Darwin, Northern Territory. There is another director based in the Northern Territory, 1 in Perth, 1 in Townsville, 1 in Rockhampton, and 1 in Brisbane. And sorry, the ex officio is obviously based in Canberra.
Yeah, sure. So that board vacancy, will there be requirements, sorry, I've just lost the word that I'm looking for. When you go to fill that role, what sort of characteristics are you going to be advertising for that you need?
Senator, the Minister is considering filling that vacancy. Sorry, are you able to hear us okay, Senator?
I am, sorry, it's the skills that I was looking for that board position. Thank you.
Yes, Senator. Obviously, the board will have a skills matrix and the Minister will consider those skills. The former member was from WA and had particular skill set. The Minister will weigh up the current industry backgrounds and other skills of the current members, and then her appointment will reflect filling in those skills matrix. I might have to take on notice exactly each sort of element of that matrix, but it will be through that process that the Minister will make her decision.
Will you advertise the role?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator. It's a matter for government to decide.
And on notice then, I'm specifically looking to see if the Northern Australian geographic location of the board member will be a necessary requirement.
I'll confirm on notice, Senator, but I would expect so.
You're not planning on living, so Senator McDonald.
Well, I live in Northern Australia, so I could. And finally, I just want to ask, following the 43% emissions target legislation and the consequential amendments in the Climate Change Bill amending the NAIF's objectives, how has this affected NAIF's investment decisions for projects in the pipeline?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. For projects that have already reached investment decision or contractual close or financial close, it hasn't in any way affected those. They're already up and running. In the pipeline at the moment, it hasn't had any impact. As part of the due diligence process, there's comprehensive Commonwealth consultation that would work through any legislation of the day that would have to comply before any funds would be through NAIF. So there's been no impact at this stage.
Senator, if I may, just to clarify, the effect of those consequential amendments are to clarify that projects that contribute to the government's net zero goals can be funded by the NAIF, and that is the extent of those amendments.
So just trying to think of a project that would be, or how that consultation would take place. So we understand the changes in the legislation. If you had a project that was currently in the pipeline but not yet reached project approval, and thank you for clarifying that there won't be any changes to projects that have already been approved, but future projects, how would you see that consultation happening? Will you have, Mr Roper, would you have, would you be making that decision within the NAIF departmental officials? Will you be getting advice from the Department of Climate Change and Energy? Could you just walk me through how the process might be if a project's identified as being in or not in line with the consequential amendments bill?
So, Senator, as a standard part of practice in the NAIF board's processes, for each decision that the board is to consider, NAIF staff consult through my staff with the rest of the Commonwealth. So each of those proposals would be the subject of input from all relevant government departments, not just a particular department. And so depending on what the proposal might be or what the decision might be, there might be a range of different comments coming from DFAT or PM&C or climate change or the industry department, agriculture department. And so we do a broad consultation process to ensure that the board is well informed about policy positions of the government, but of course that's an independent consideration for the board. Once they've received that information, that's something they can take into account in their decision making.
Okay, so a final question, Chair. Specifically, a project that now makes application for a NAIF loan under the existing legislation, let's say it's a met coal project. Met coal is still an important part of meeting climate change emissions, given it makes steel and a whole lot of other important things. It's captured under Scope 3. Would that be a project that could be considered under a NAIF loan currently? Oh.
That's convenient.
That's
Well, there you go. There you
Sorry,
go.
Senator, you lost me there.
Yes. Could you advise me, a met coal project that applies for NAIF funding now, would that be eligible for approval under the current legislation?
Yes, Senator. Yes, we would still, every project would still be considered. We'd have to then go what the proponent information is provided and does it meet all legislative requirements. As Mr Roper said, we consult with all government departments as part of that process. That's feedback that the independent board of NAIF consider. So we would still put every project through that process if it meets our eligibility criteria, and if the proponent can meet the legislation requirements, it would be considered.
Okay, because the legislation is quite broad, and something like met coal, which is a necessary component for energy, for steel, for making, for processing rare earths and critical minerals to make our phone, make our Tesla battery. I'm just wondering how which department is going to be able to provide you with some clear advice, because speed of decision making will be critical for whether these projects go ahead.
Yeah, the process hasn't changed, Senator, in that the feedback comes back in a quite timely manner from the Commonwealth. It's typically weeks from multiple departments back through our process. We then take that information. If something comes from a department, that department information isn't in any way dictating whether the project should succeed or not. That's up to the independent processes of NAIF to decide. However, if something was raised in that consultation saying The information you provided us, you need to check, you might want to check this, or if you haven't already put it in the paperwork, we'd have a look at that. And then we'd also obviously consider the financials and other things that don't go through into that consultation process. So we would still put any project through based on its merit, and whatever the legislation of the day is, that would have to be met as part of that process.
Okay. Yes. Oh, well, I was just going to throw to the Minister if I could, but...
Another one more.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. So, Minister, what is your view on the NAIF's ability under the consequential amendments legislation to fund a project that would be met coal, gas, a fossil fuel project is really what I'm asking.
Right, so what we've already heard is that the Act clarifies that projects that contribute to the achievements of Australia's greenhouse gas emission targets can be financed by the NAIF, but the Act does not change other eligibility criteria for the NAIF, and the officers have already gone through the processes that they employ, and they remain unchanged, as from the evidence I've heard.
Well, that seems heartening. Thank you.
Can I just follow up? To either Mr Doyle or Mr Roper primarily, I mean, can you provide any guidance, though, for project proponents on whether they have to either partially or fully offset any emissions, either Scope 1, Scope 2 or Scope 3, carbon dioxide emissions, of course, as a result of that come from their project?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We are working through that process once we see the detail around the climate bill, the explanatory notes, to be able to understand that in better so we can provide more guidance to our proponents, but that has not been done as yet.
So you're working on that now. When you say the climate bill, you're talking of the bill that enshrined the 43% net zero and also changed your Act, or some consequential Act amendments changed your Act. So that bill has gone through. I presume it's had royal assent as well. And people are obviously then in limbo now, given that evidence you've just given. How long is it going to take to provide this guidance to proponents?
Well, if a project came through now, as you would know, it's quite a timely process through our active inquiry and SAP. So we'd have that ready for any project that would come through and understand that through that process.
Yeah, it's just though that it, as you would understand, I'm sure it takes a bit of effort for people to even, put in an application, prepare it. If you can't even let them know up front whether they have to do these things, it potentially makes a big difference to the cost of the project, having to offset emissions. That is going to be a barrier to get things through. So, but it seemed to indicate before you would be providing more generic guidance, if you like, on a specific basis about what would be expected by the NAIF. So is that happening? That's what I heard. So you are working on some generic guidelines in regards to carbon dioxide emissions?
We're working on some guidelines, yes. Every project's fundamentally different that we propose. So having guidelines that would reach across our diverse portfolio, one project could be completely different to the other. So that's what we're trying to narrow down about how that would affect different types of projects that may come through.
Just go back to that. When are those guidelines likely to be finalised? The generic
we have that sorted in the early next year.
Early next year. Okay. I'll just make the point here that, as I'm sure you're familiar, there's a big part of Northern Australia's economy is related to mining. Indeed, in some measures, around half of Northern Australia's economy, it comes from the resources sector. And even if the project's not one that's coal or gas, even iron ore projects have significant carbon emission profiles given the use of diesel in remote areas. So this is very, very important and a big limiting factor. I'd also add too, given the government's stated ambition to lower power prices, consistent with their election promise, a big issue is the supply of gas. And there are some very prospective projects in Northern Australia. Potentially the NAIF could help significantly, especially with pipelines, go right into your portfolio. So I would think this is urgent, and I'm surprised the government isn't actually cracking the whip here a little bit, because the longer you delay here, as I say, people just are going to go elsewhere if they can't get certainty from a financier about what's expected before they walk in the door. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, just to follow up on that, Chair, I see your face.
I am under no illusions that we've got others to get to, and I've been guaranteed we're going to get to them. So, Senator McDonald, another last one?
Well, it's last two, that the emissions, the transmission lines that you are considering as under your pipeline projects that I asked about earlier, some of those will be affected by energy sources. And so, just following on from Senator Canavan's question, you know, gas will be one of the energy components, particularly for the copper string transmission line and others. So, you know, this question is you know, you must already be considering that, or in your assessment of whether or not a project would proceed.
Yeah, that's correct, Senator. And just to clarify, if I was misleading, is most of our loans are through the jurisdictions. So the jurisdictional impacts and measurement will be taken into account as well. So they would be also part of that consultation process that would feed in, and they've got, they'd have more detail as well. So it may seem that we may not have the guidelines that would be a gate process, but we use jurisdictional loans as predominantly our loan source. So they also have criteria that are consulted as part of that process.
And have any of the projects that were in the pipeline with NAIF been affected by Minister Plibersek's decision to cancel the Northern Water projects?
No.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. All the best. And we will now call Infrastructure Australia, sorry. I keep seeing two infrastructures. Name person.
No, I'm just...
Welcome, gentlemen. Does anyone wish to make an opening statement before we go to questions? Thank you. Who's got lead? Senator Canavan? Senator McKenzie.
Thank you. Welcome. Understand Mr Murdoch and Ms Lockwood are conducting a review.
Correct, yes, Senator.
Yes. Were Infrastructure Australia board members consulted by the reviewers?
They were, yes, Senator.
They were? Yep. Were senior staff consulted by the reviewers?
They were, yes.
They were. Did the board make a submission to the review?
The board itself did not make a submission. I believe some individual board directors did.
Right. What did the individual directors, don't identify them, but what sorts of recommendations did they
I'm
make
not aware
to the
of
review?
what the recommendations that they made, Senator.
You're not aware of
The
their
recommendations.
views of how to improve IA?
I'm not aware of what was in their actual submission.
Right. Have the board members been briefed on the outcomes of the review?
No, Senator.
Have senior staff?
No, Senator.
When will the review, when will they be briefed?
My understanding, based on public pronouncements, is that the outcomes of the review will be released soon, but I'm not sure of the exact
Before
time when we'll be
Christmas?
briefed. That's my understanding. That's what's been publicly
Right.
announced.
And do you have a board meeting scheduled before Christmas?
No, Senator.
Okay. Will staff be briefed before the board members?
That's a matter for the Minister, I believe, Senator.
Right. Could you list all the projects that have been referred to IA since the 22nd of May?
I might ask Mr Tucker to look that up.
Sorry, could I just get that name tag in front of the... Yeah, thank you. Mr Tucker.
Thank you, Senator.
Just identify yourself.
Yep. David Tucker, I'm the Chief of Project Advisory and Evaluation. So since the 22nd of May, was your date,
Yep.
we have completed 10 business case evaluations since that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read those out
Thank you.
for you.
Thank you.
Dungowan Dam,
Right.
the Napoleon Road upgrade, the Dorset Road extension, the Monash Roads upgrade, the Great Western Highway east and west sections, Singleton Bypass, the Mitchell and Kwinana Freeways upgrade, the Pakenham Roads upgrade, Melbourne Airport Rail, and finally the Logan Gold Coast Faster Rail, Kirby to Beenleigh.
Thank you. So they're the business cases that have been completed.
Correct.
Could you list all the projects that have been referred to you for examine to check out since the 22nd of May?
We only have one that's currently active with us, and that's the Muswellbrook Bypass on the New England Highway.
So the suburban rail loop hasn't been referred to you?
Not at this point in time.
Okay, so how many projects are you currently under assessment in the organisation?
Just that one for the Muswellbrook
So
Bypass.
you've completed those, you've got Muswellbrook,
Correct.
and you're waiting for referrals.
At the business case stage, yes. We have received other submissions at earlier stages.
Thank you.
And there's a number of those.
Run me through those ones since the 22nd of May.
I wouldn't be able to recall them all, but I can give you a few of them now if you wish, and
yeah.
and then we can, and then I'll ensure that
So
that's
how many
completed.
are there?
We've received a stage 2 submission, which is around options analysis for the Westport project in WA.
Yep.
For the Northwest Transport Network in Brisbane.
Yep.
There would be some projects on the Bruce Highway in Queensland that we've looked at over the last 6 months. We recently had a submission for logistics hubs in the Northern Territory. That's a few that are just
So,
immediately
Mr. Tucker, I know
spring to
you're
mind.
relying on your memory right now, and that it's great that you're able to give me that information. But do you have a document on your iPad that you can just run me through the list of projects that have been referred to Infrastructure Australia, not at the business case stage, but at the early assessment stage?
I don't have that on my iPad at the moment.
Does
no.
anyone behind you have it in a folder?
My colleagues would be able to hopefully bring up a list of other assessments that we've been undertaking in that time.
Okay, so hopefully someone behind you is madly going through a folder to help Mr. Tucker, because he's only going to be in front of us for about another 10 minutes. So please bring that information up. Okay, has there been any changes in Infrastructure Australia's prioritisation or assessment of projects previously assessed since the 22nd of May?
Sorry, Senator, what do you mean?
So if you've changed or been asked to re-examine projects that you've already taken a look at?
I don't believe so, no, Senator. We haven't.
No. Okay. And any changes in the way you prioritise projects?
None other than the legislative change around climate change legislation.
The net zero stuff. I'm waiting for your colleagues. Sure. Mr. Tucker? Maybe, Mr. Tucker, while you're working on that, Mr. Kopp, you could help me. Of all the projects which the government announced in the October budget, over $250 million worth, how many have been referred to IEA for any level of assessment?
I don't believe any at this stage. Yeah, I don't believe any at this stage.
Usually there will be an announcement around a funding envelope, and then there's a requirement under the partnership agreement that we assess the business case in due course.
The funding envelope for the project?
Yes.
At a project level? So the government hasn't put anything through Infrastructure Australia since coming to government?
Usually the proponent the state government sends it to Infrastructure Australia in response to an indication of funding from the Australian government, or they are seeking funding from the Australian government.
And I'm waiting for that list from Mr Tucker.
Yes, thank you. Looking behind my colleagues, but we'll continue to work on that.
Is there a particular project you're seeking to
No,
understand?
I'd like to understand your workload and what's in the pipeline.
Sure.
I don't have any. I wanted to go through that. So, yeah, you go.
Okay. Through you, Chair, thank you. I just wanted to drill down. You mentioned you've been, I think, referred or starting to look at some projects on the Bruce Highway. Could you run through what exactly those investments are that you're investigating?
I know that we've had some early engagement with the Queensland Government on the Tiaro bypass.
Right.
I don't recall receiving an actual submission on that at the moment. It's more been an early engagement activity, and we're expecting a submission soon on that one.
That project is already funded. We've been through that earlier today. So the work you do now, could that call into question the funding of that? I mean, if it comes back with a negative assessment?
It could, Senator. Usually the state will develop up a business case, but when we're in early engagement, that's our opportunity to influence how that is developed and what they need to think about to make sure it's got its best position forward for a final assessment. But yeah, sometimes we look at a project after it's been funded and we find that we don't recommend it, and then it's up to government what they decide to do with it from there.
And so that just to be clear, that's been referred to you by the Queensland Government, has it, the Tyro bypass?
That's who's engaging with us,
Yep.
and we're working with us this time.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr Tucker, have you found the other projects?
We've had also we've had a submission on the Bruce Highway and Gateway Motorway. Right. There's a program of work in that corridor to the north of Brisbane.
Yep.
We've had engagement at a stage 2 level. We've had engagement again with the Queensland Government on the Paradise Dam project.
Okay, so that's not Bruce Highway, obviously.
That's not Bruce Highway,
right,
of course.
Okay. I'm hoping there's some projects north of Gympie, or Tyro's slightly north of Gympie, but not far. Yeah. Nothing north of the Tropic of Capricorn?
No. Couple of other projects that I
The
can
road's
now
perfect, of course, in North Queensland, out of McDonald's.
That's what I say every day.
So some other projects that I can now see, we've had engagement with the South Australian Government on the northern...
Oh, look, I was just asking about the Bruce Highway, sorry.
Yeah, I
Excuse my
don't think there are any others
I've
on
got
the Bruce
my
Highway.
Queensland Senator hat on, and okay, so you've only got there the Gateway, which is Brisbane, effectively, and Tyro, which is a very important project, the Tyro bypass, but it'd be nice to have some things in North Queensland. I'll hand back through you, Chair, to Senator McKenzie.
Yes, sure.
All I can do is give you some others as I'm seeing them on my list. That would include the Northern South Australia water proposal in South Australia. That was from the South Australian Government. We've had engagement with the ARTC on the Port of Portland rail line. Yeah, that's all I'm seeing from the list I've got at the moment, and maybe my colleagues will add to that list.
So that adds up to that adds up to what, about 10 projects in front of you any level of assessment?
Yes, that would sound about right.
Yep. If on notice, could you give me the full detail, a nice little table, and where it is in your assessment processes? Thank you so much. Just going to the suburban rail loop, what information would you generally require from state officials to support an assessment of a major rail project like this?
We would generally need a full business case which has all the economic analysis, the VCR, some of the environmental information. We like to see how it fits into the broader network. So generally a full business case. That would be a full project? We would prefer to have a full understanding of the program, particularly and how it fits in with the broader network as well.
Have you received anything from the Victorian Government about this project?
It's on our priority. Well, the problem that it's trying to solve is on our priority list. It's they've submitted a problem identification, a stage 1 in our process. So that's for Melbourne Middle and Outer Suburban.
When did they submit that?
It would have been last year, September last year. So that has been added to the list, and we're recognising that there is an issue to solve there around connecting the outer suburbs of Melbourne. We understand that they're working on a business case at the moment for submission to us at some stage.
And you have no idea when that'll arrive? But that whenever they finish it.
Early next year is the indication once it's gone through Victorian Cabinet.
So just to be clear, the only documentation or information you have from the Victorian Government on this project is the September 21.
We have also been provided with the link to the publicly available business and investment case,
right,
which is available from the Victorian Government. We did on request of the previous government, a high-level analysis, essentially a gap analysis of what we would need to see for a full business case assessment by us.
Okay. Have you assessed the Victorian Auditor General's quality of major transport infrastructure project business case?
The Auditor General report into... Yes, we have read it, yes.
Yes. Have you spoken to the Victorian Auditor General's office regarding their concerns with the quality of the business case that you're...
We haven't spoken to them.
Will you be?
We don't intend to at this stage. It's not a usual part of our assessment process. We would generally assess the project on the basis of the business case. Well, you're probably not usually
being asked to fund things that have a negative Auditor General's report. Have you ever been asked to assess a project that has a negative Auditor General's report from any state government?
Not previous to the investment
I'd be very surprised if you had it. So are there differences in standards between the Victorian Auditor General, what they've recommended, and what you would recommend in terms of the quality of the business case assessment?
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't hear the first part of the question.
So a difference between what you would require from a business case as opposed to what the Victorian Auditor General would require as a quality business case?
From my understanding, we have different processes and we're not across their process in particular, but it's fairly standard what you would expect in a business case.
Yeah, so have you assessed the findings of the Victorian Parliamentary Budget Office, which has estimated significantly higher construction costs for the suburban rail loop than those that have been used by the Victorian Government?
I have not read that. Have you read that?
No, I haven't.
On notice, probably Mr Tucker, you'll get assigned this one. Could I actually, on notice, have your assessment of what the Victorian Parliamentary Budget Office costings are around this project? Because my understanding is they're quite different, and I'd appreciate your advice around that. Okay. Have you made any recommendations or provided advice to the government in relation to the suburban rail loop? Your government? Our government? No, you haven't? And what assessments or work has the Minister or Commonwealth Government asked you to do on the suburban rail loop?
None at this stage, Senator.
None at this stage, okay. Just the fact that it is an election commitment and listed in the October budget?
We would expect to see a business case in due course, yes.
But Minister King's office hasn't requested anything of you? Yep. The Minister has stated that if Infrastructure Australia's assessment does not support the suburban rail loop project progressing, that she would work with the Victorian Government to, and direct quote, make it stack up. Has the Minister discussed with Infrastructure Australia what process would need to be undertaken to make a project like this stack up?
We haven't had that discussion.
What work must be undertaken by Infrastructure Australia and what level of recommendation received from Infrastructure Australia before the government would release the committed funding?
Are you asking, Senator, what is
What
our...
do they need from you to unlock the funding?
Under the National Partnership Agreement, It's a requirement that we assess the project.
Right.
But it's not a requirement at this stage that we have a positive outcome from it.
So it's, the Prime Minister himself, and indeed backed up by Minister King, has made a big deal about the role of Infrastructure Australia in any commitment of funding by this government. Has there been a change to that process, that it only needs to be assessed? There's no sort of requirement for the government to give regard to your advice on projects? There's been no change?
No change at this stage.
No change. Do you anticipate that to happen?
That's a matter for the Minister.
It is. It's odd. I have no further questions.
Well, in that case, colleagues, I'm going to come to you, mindful that we have our next couple of agencies. One's travelled down from Sydney and we are closing at 12 o'clock on the dot. Senator McDonald.
Thank you. I will be to the point. So I was very pleased to see in the regional gap analysis that was published in March that there was a section on Northern Australia. But in the latest update, where's that focus gone? Is there still the same? What is your focus then on Northern Australia according to the latest gap analysis?
I'll answer briefly and then refer to my colleague, Mr. Brogan. There's no change in the report itself from last time, other than some further analysis done on other regions that weren't originally in there, like some of the territories. So I might ask Mr. Brogan to expand on if there's anything more on that.
Yeah, so Mr. Steve Brogan, Acting Chief of Policy and Research. Mr. Kopp is quite right. There hasn't been any changes to the analysis that we published in March, highlighting the gaps in Northern Australia among other regions across Australia.
So have you had your new board appointed yet?
No, Senator.
And you don't have any idea when that will, don't worry, that'll be a decision of the ministers. So, you know, this was the first time that Northern Australia had been identified as a discrete region by Infrastructure Australia, that last gap analysis. Is there any, what work are you doing going forward? Because it was really just it was a taster, a teaser. What work are you doing on further infrastructure priorities and needs for Northern Australia?
So in our Australian, it's not quite correct to say that we haven't had regard. So in 2015 we released a Northern Australia audit, and in our Australian Infrastructure Plan in 2021 we had Northern Australia as a particular geography, along with fast-growing cities and other types of geographies as a particular focus. Considering that we're under review, we're focused on seeing out our current work program, which is focused on market capacity, regional strengths and infrastructure gaps in particular. And we await the outcome of the review before we move into other areas of policy going forward.
Right. Did you have any input or consultation with the department on the regions of growth and master planning process?
No, Senator.
So they didn't ask you for input or consultation on master planning for infrastructure in Northern Australia?
Not directly, although I believe that the work has been influential. The regional strengths gap work.
The GAPS network
Yes.
has been influential?
Yes.
Right.
But we haven't been formally consulted, other than our report being put out.
Right. So on notice, could you provide me with a list of projects that you've identified in Northern Australia? And, you know, future planning for the north and infrastructure?
Certainly. And the infrastructure priority list has a number of projects in Northern Australia and opportunities for development there. So on the project advisory side of the business, there's a lot of work done in that space as well.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm looking for is that more structured planning rather than discrete projects that have no connectivity to, you know, broader planning in Northern Australia.
Certainly, Senator.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Coman, you've been done?
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Copp and crew. Safe travels, and we'll now call National Intermodal Corporation Limited, where we'll have about 15 minutes at the most, and then the ARTC. So, Mr Balderstone, you'll get to tell us what a magnificent project you've got going out there.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do that. So welcome, Mr Balderstone. You've probably got an opening statement. Could I ask that you table it, please? I know what a magnificent project you're doing, and I urge every senator and member and minister to get out there and have a look what you're doing out there. If that's all right with you, because I think there are questions and we don't want to waste. Oh, no, not waste. We don't want to lose too much time if we can ask the question.
In your hands, Chair.
Thanks, Mr Balderstone. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you. We'll just get right into it because we've got 15 minutes. How many staff are employed by the National Intermodal Corp and where are they based?
Yeah, we've effectively got about 28 full-time equivalent headcount, and we're based in Sydney. We have a number of people also located on site out at Moorebank at the moment.
At Moorebank.
And we have one staff member in Melbourne.
One in Melbourne. How many at Moorebank?
Between 1 and 2,
okay,
depending on the time of day.
So I understand that all legislative requirements have been completed for the company name change. What is the status of the rebranding?
We're now fully rebranded as National Intermodal. Previously we were Moorebank Intermodal, but we've now had our remit and our statement of expectations expanded to cover assisting with intermodal terminals for Melbourne and Brisbane as part of NRL.
Yep, and has the your website been updated?
We're in the process of getting that finalised. It hasn't been launched at the moment, but it's imminent.
Imminent, before Christmas?
My CFO here is also in charge of IT.
There you go, Mr McDonald.
I'm not sure that we're...
Boss wants the
so
timeline.
look, I think it'll be earlier in the new year rather than before Christmas.
Right. Have you received the equity investment for the development of the Melbourne intermodal terminals?
We have received a preliminary funding source to allow us to continue the planning and environmental studies and the various aspects in relation to getting ready for those future investments.
So, what certainty has the government given you of their financial situation and this additional funding for the Melbourne intermodal terminals?
We're about the same situation we were pre-election, so we're effectively working with our departments and also with the Queensland Government and Victorian Government to plan and finalise the decision in relation to locations of those intermodal terminals.
Okay, your statement of expectations has changed?
From Moorebank Intermodal has, yes.
Yep.
It's now been broadened to include terminals in Brisbane and Melbourne.
Okay, and that statement of expectations will be on the new Lisbang?
It will be.
Right.
It actually might be on our current old semi-Wisbang.
All right, well, it is an intermodal terminal.
They're
How
very
exciting
exciting.
can they be? I've got some specific questions about Melbourne and Brisbane. Can you provide an update on the work you've undertaken since the March budget on the development of Beveridge Intermodal Terminal, please?
Yes, certainly, Senator. The Melbourne location for NRL is obviously extremely important. It is Australia's premier location for rail freight.
So just with respect, I know how important the Inland Rail is, so why don't we just cut to the chase and the update of the work that you've taken since March on the development of the Beveridge Intermodal Terminal.
So we continue to look at the optimal locations and the designs for the intermodal terminals in Melbourne. As you would be aware, there are two potential locations, Bift and Wift, one in Beveridge, one in Truganina. and we have a design
So
team.
has any work been done since March on the
Senator.
beverage?
Yes, Senator, we continue to look at various designs, location, layouts,
Righto, that's okay.
size, warehousing.
Yep, cool. What engagement have you had with Infrastructure Australia on these projects?
That is not a process we go through at the moment. There is an initial indication in relation, I think the Victorian Government has put forward basically an opening statement in relation to the terminals, particularly around Melbourne, that effectively supports the view of early land acquisition. But at the moment, there is no finalised business case for the final development.
So what's the status of due diligence on the land at Beveridge and the negotiations with Cube?
Yeah, so Cube's well finalised, so effectively we've taken over the option from Cube, so Cube is no longer involved in that option arrangement. We have finalised all our valuations and assessments, and that's now been tabled with the department.
So it's sitting with the department, but we haven't purchased or finalised a purchase of the land at Beveridge.
We've got a number of months until the option expires, so it's...
How many months?
It's basically towards the end of February.
Okay, thank you. So that's all up at the department waiting for sign-off. Have you been involved in the government's review of the Inland Rail project?
We've had a number of discussions with Dr Schott particularly in relation to the terminal. So the review covers both the track and the terminal, so we've had a number of discussions in relation to locations and timing and
Have you made a formal submission?
No, we've just been interviewed.
Okay, and are you planning on making a formal submission?
No, we don't plan.
Okay. Just the process around the land at Beveridge, sitting with the department, do you need ministerial approval to purchase that land?
Yes, we do.
Yep. Okay. Has the review of the Inland Rail caused a delay in progressing the Beveridge or Truganina intermodal terminal projects?
No, I think there is a great deal of due diligence and study and activities that need to take place to ensure that such major projects are ultimately successful. So we continue to do our work.
Yeah. Okay. Has Victoria committed any funding to the development of a new intermodal terminal?
I'm not aware precisely, but I understand they have some study money in their budget. We continue to work closely with Victorian representatives. Again, these are important decisions, and there is a good collegiate discussion that goes on.
So have you've been involved in the negotiations with the Victorian Government on the delivery of both terminals?
I'm really a technical advisor per se. I've had a number of discussions with the Victorian departments, but that's really a job for the departments to nut out the final decisions around that.
So is it your understanding that the federal government is still proceeding with a two-terminal strategy in Melbourne?
That's part of the Inland Rail review, is my understanding.
And you're not aware of the government's preference?
No, I think they're waiting for the outcome of the Schott review.
Okay. What's your understanding of when either site can be operational?
They both have their... That's a good question. They both have their pros and cons. Obviously, Beveridge is the easier terminal to connect to Inland Rail because it basically sits right on the Inland Rail corridor. The Truganina site is more difficult. It needs a connection either from the south or the north. That'll take some time. To give you my best estimate, I think Beveridge could be operational in about 5 years' time.
Yep.
I think WIF could be operational in probably about 7 years' time.
Okay, and when are we planning on getting the Inland Rail done?
Well, it depends on what you mean by Inland Rail. I think Inland Rail is a great project, and I think we can get the southern part of Inland Rail done as quickly as possible. One of the great things about the northern terminal in particular in Melbourne is that we could already start double stacking trains directly to Perth via Parkes with that first section done.
So if we're planning to get Inland Rail, 27, Truganina won't be ready in your assessment until
close.
2030.
No. We would be looking at getting beefed up and running in line with the Inland Rail opening as soon as it was there. Like obviously, one of the work we have been doing over the last few months is looking at what is an early staged terminal in Melbourne, where we can actually get potential interested operators to come in before the full scale development is done.
Has the business case for the Brisbane terminal been completed?
So that's being undertaken by the Queensland Government at the moment. Commonwealth departments are fully engaged and working cooperatively. We provide technical input into that study, and I can say it's a very, again, collaborative and good process that we're undertaking with Queensland.
So when will it be completed?
That's really a matter for the government's departments.
But you're collaborating?
I'm collaborating, but I'm outside of direct government role. But I'm understanding it's imminent early in the new year, I believe.
Okay,
but
great. That'd be great.
Further to that, Senator Mackenzie, just where is that? Where
So
is that
are Ebenezer and Acacia Ridge still the preferred location?
I think I heard last time I was attending estimates is there are 3 or 4 sites that have been earmarked for assessment. I understand Ebenezer is the current preferred site by the Queensland Government and the Commonwealth Government.
Can I just ask, so you're aware of the alternative locations to Ebenezer and Acacia Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
You're collaborating with the Queensland Government. Correct. Are all 4 locations being assessed by the business case that's currently being developed?
It was before my time, but I understand I think there were 5 sites actually
5 sites.
that had all been assessed, and there were a number of it had come out as preferred.
Yep.
And they were now looking at the final option. Has not been decided yet.
No, I appreciate that. That'll end up being a decision point further down the track. So can you just give me the 5?
We'll test one around. So there is Toowoomba.
Yep.
There is Ebenezer.
Yep.
There is Bromwellton.
Yep.
There is Acacia Ridge.
Yep.
And the 5th one is the defence site.
It's a
Green something or other. Yes. It's a
okay.
defence site.
Everyone's nodding. I assume that means something in Queensland. So just in terms of timelines for the Brisbane terminal, in regards to decision planning and construction, are you... we just want, I guess, the Inland Rail finalisation to be timed appropriately with any intermodal terminal. Are you confident that this process is going to deliver on that?
That's, I think, really a matter for the Inland Rail team to answer. As I said, at the moment, we're really a technical advisor for the Queensland end, and we assist where we can, and we leave that up to the Inland Rail project to.
Thank you, Suze. Did you have questions?
No, thank you.
That's fine. Just a last on Truganina. Can you double stack at Truganina?
You can only double stack at Truganina if OMR North is built.
Righto. So.
That's
okay.
No, I think.
That's a no. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator White.
Thanks very much for coming down and talking about these exciting projects that you have underway. I just wondered if you could tell me, I think this is our 4th day of hearings, how many times have you been down here waiting for to get on to talk to us for 15 minutes? And how many people did you bring with you?
This is our 2nd visit to Canberra, and the team is 2 of us or 3 of us have come down.
And so the first time was what day? Is that the first day? I think you were listed for the first day.
3 weeks ago, I can't remember.
Yeah, the first day. So you were here for what, the whole day, 9 till 5?
No, we came down and we had some meetings with our departments, and
Thank
so
you.
we made hopefully productive use of the time, and we learnt how it works, and we watched the process. So I think it was actually quite a valuable exercise.
Learning process. Well, you could have watched it online, but I hear what you say. Could you give me an estimate of what you thought it's cost you to participate in this?
I think travel time is probably $3,000. Obviously, there's extensive preparation time. You know, we spend a lot of public money, so it's important that we actually can be across and answer the questions as they come up. So again, our time is valuable, but this is a valuable process as well.
Yeah, I understand.
Same question we used to ask
Sorry,
when,
as Senator
we're in
Mackenzie
government.
mentioned, I'm new to the process.
Let's play fair.
3 weeks
Yeah.
ago, so I just wanted
That's
to
right.
understand what it costs you and how you see that. But I understand, as I said, time is money, as they say, isn't it?
It's
But
public
thank you
money,
very
so
much
the scrutiny is important.
for your frank assessment and for the information that you've provided to us.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator White. Mr. Balderstone, before you go, and your crew, can I just take this opportunity? Would you please write to this committee, to the Secretariat, to Jerry and his fine crew, and invite us to tour next time we have hearings in Sydney, because I would urge the committee to get out there and see this magnificent project. For those of us that have an interest in road, rail and ports, you have to get out there and have a look. So, Mr. Ballston, if you could do that for us, please.
It's my absolute pleasure, Chair. It is Australia's largest, most exciting transformational supply chain project, so we'd love to have you out there.
I actually agree, because I had the pleasure of visiting a couple of weeks ago and having a look around.
Chair, can I just ask, that OMAR, when you mentioned that before, that in order to double stack a Truganina, you need to complete OMAR.
Yep.
What's the cost of OMAR?
I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. That assessment was done by the department.
Would it be billions of dollars?
I imagine it would be in that order of
Would it
magnitude.
be $9 billion?
It's a better question to ask for the department who did the assessment.
All right, I will come back and ask them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ballstone, and crew, travel safely. And we will now call ARTC for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So welcome, Mr. Campbell and team, and I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell, if you do have an opening statement, could you indulge the committee and table it for us so we can get straight to questions? I apologise. We do have a very strict hard marker.
Yep, that's fine.
Questions? Senator McKenzie.
Welcome. Just want to go to the impact of flooding on the ARTC rail network. If you could give us an update, what sections of the rail network have been closed, for how long, cost to the economy of consignments delayed due to inaccessible rail networks.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I'll refer this to my colleague, Mr. Ormsby, but yeah, we've had substantial flooding over probably a 2-year period now, and it's been devastating for a lot of communities. Simon?
Yeah, thanks. So Simon Ormsby, Group Executive, Interstate Network. So Senator, current flooding events, or would you like a sort of short history?
We've got 13 minutes, so just what
Let's go to
sections
current.
have been
So we'll go to
impacted
current.
and
Yeah, so
closed due to flooding?
Yeah, currently we have 2 sections of network closed. So the section between Parkes and Cootamundra.
Yep.
So Lachlan River through Forbes. It's
Yep.
From Cootamundra to Warringah is open.
Yep.
We reopened that last week. That picks up some important grain activity, and the remaining section, Warringah to Parkes, we're expecting to reopen tomorrow. All going well. The other larger section is Parkes to Broken Hill. That is currently closed. We have flooding in 2 locations and well publicised. Obviously, a lot of impact to the communities there in Condobolin and New Avalon. We have about 30 to 40 kilometres of that corridor that's been impacted by flooding. At this stage, we've estimated 4.5 kilometres of damage to the rail infrastructure. We are limited in our access still. The height of the Lachlan, so this is the Lachlan River downstream area, the height of the Lachlan River through the New Avalon area is still extremely high and it's unsafe to access. So we're unable to get in and see that. We have been able to assess the damage around the Condobolin area, and we've started some works just west of Parkes to start the rectifications. So at this stage, given the height, we're having to wait for waters to subside. We're hopeful that the waters have turned and they are doing that. Certainly we're seeing that at Condobolin. New Avalon's still got some way to go. So at this stage, we can't able to put an accurate time frame on the reopening of that corridor.
How many containers and or wagons have been transitioned from rail to truck as a result of the inaccessible rail network?
So I couldn't answer that with any sort of confidence or specific numbers. I can tell you that because that corridor lost the Sydney to Perth freight that's impacted, and some steel traffic from Whyalla to Newcastle, a little bit of grain, but we should get the grain section reopened soon. Our customers are able to run an alternate route, so they're able to take that freight through to Melbourne and to Adelaide and to Perth. They are doing that. Our major customer is currently running 4 trains a week, and I understand that's going to go to 6 container trains. Second largest customer is running several trains a week as well on that route, and the Still train has been diverted, as is the passenger train, the Journey Beyond passenger train, Indian Pacific.
So maybe on notice, when you get home, I would like to know the sections of rail, not just current, but probably over the course of the year, how long they've been out of action, what is the cost to the economy of consignments delayed due to inaccessible rail network, and you were talking about the grain industry, etc. I would like to know how many containers and wagons have had to be transferred for each of those closures of rail network, and then I want to understand the cost of rehabilitating flood-affected rail network. You've said you're out assessing now and rebuilding in some cases. So I really want to understand the cost of that and any learnings you've had in terms of the resilience of the rail infrastructure network as a result of the unseasonal flood events we've had. I want specific advice on the 14th of November derailment of a freight train near Inverleigh. Is someone here that can talk to me about that? What was the cause of the rail damage?
We believe the cause of the rail damage was a significant rain event in the vicinity of Inverleigh, which caused flooding, localised flooding, and we believe at this stage it effectively washed out part of the track around a culvert, and when the track had been washed out, then the train went over the track and derailed.
Could have that incident been avoided? Was the culvert part of the problem?
Senator, the culvert itself was not the culvert itself was there because there was a gully between 2 farmers' fields.
Yep.
It wasn't a watercourse as such, and therefore we wouldn't ever in the past have regarded as a creek that was likely to flood. What we believe was an intense rainstorm in the vicinity, on top of already water-soaked ground, which just caused a lot of water to go into that gully. We've never had any history of flooding or anything approaching flooding in this location before, and so subsequent to the event, we've now replaced that one culvert with 2 much larger ones, but it was not on our. It was not a planned piece of improvement.
So what were the cost of those repairs?
I think we're still assessing that. I don't think we can provide that on notice, actually, Senator.
Fantastic. Just to the Inland Rail, has the ARTC been consulted by the reviewers?
Yes, we've been collaborating with Dr. Schott and the review team.
Have you put in a formal submission?
No, I wouldn't call it that. We've provided lots of information that is on lots of different subjects that Dr. Schott's asked questions about.
On notice, could you please provide that information to this committee?
I think we can look to see what we can provide.
We're always interested in trains. Has the ARTC been asked to review the route or potential revisions to the Inland Rails?
No, Senator, we've not been asked to do that.
Have you been asked to provide advice in relation to the extension of the Inland Rail to Gladstone?
No, Senator, no.
Okay, I'm done. You go.
All done.
So, despite it being a commitment of both parties of government in the last election to build to Gladstone, you've not been asked to do any work on that at all?
I'm not aware that we've done any work on that extension to Gladstone.
So the Queensland Government is working with the Commonwealth to, I think, appoint some independent advisors to do a business case to look at it. We have said that if they need technical input from us, we will provide it, but I don't believe we've been formally approached at this point to provide.
We wouldn't really have any information on that route. We're obviously completely involved in Brisbane to Melbourne, but have not been engaged or done any studies on Toowoomba to Gladstone.
Okay. There's some excitement on the ground in Queensland. Warwick is back on the table, it seems. Have you been asked to reconsider Warwick?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Senator.
And finally, I will table a letter from a representative of landholders between the Narromine, along the North Star border and Narromine to Narrabri project.
One more.
Who have been writing to you for some time and not received any responses. I'll just table that letter and ask you to respond.
That's great.
Please, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Mackenzie, last one, I believe.
It is, Chair. Thank you. So Queensland State Government is working on a business case?
I understand that they are at
Working
least
something
gearing
up.
up to, yes. Yep.
I would find it incredible that in working up a business case, they don't talk to the delivery agency, being you guys.
I think, Senator, that's probably more for the department. I think the department, because from a ARTC...
How does it work?
Inland Rail Delivery Agency, we're very busy trying to deliver between Brisbane and Melbourne. I think the department are involved with the Queensland Government in looking at the business case for Gladstone. I assume that's the case anyway. We haven't been involved.
So they do all the costings and you don't. Do they come to you to sort of check their sums?
I'm not sure whether they have, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did in the future. Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case.
Yeah.
They would certainly want our input, I would think.
Yeah, well, just on notice, because I'm sure there's... Just on notice, if you could provide any discussions the ARTC officials have had with the Queensland State Government about the business case. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, last question for Orla. Senator White.
Thank you. I was interested in your discussion about the culvert and the unprecedented nature of that, of the derailment and the damage to the tracks. Has that precipitated you to change your risk assessment of these sort of events and the probability of the effects on the track of significant weather incidents? And if so, if it has precipitated that, precipitated is probably a very good word, really. If it has done that, can you explain what risk assessment process you have in relation to the track?
Senator, we have obviously been dealing with numerous flooding events over a 2-year period now, but particularly in this last 12 months, starting about this time last year, and we are undertaking a full review, including 2 new hydrology studies on the east-west corridor and on the north-south corridor to update how we view flood events, because previous studies that we've had done back in sort of 2017, I think was the previous one, we're just seeing different types of rainfall, different events that were not contemplated when we did the previous set of studies. So we are intending in the next month or so to have all that work complete, and hope that, well, not hope, we expect it to point us to various places on our network where we should be improving the resilience of it. We have some idea currently, and we've put an additional $170 million in our budget over the next 3 years to do the upgrades that we currently think would make a big improvement, but we need these 2 quite significant studies to help inform what other improvements we can make.
So I presume that it wouldn't just be upgrades, it could be we have to divert from this these particular routes because the cost benefit and the risks have got higher. Is that part of the studies you're discussing, or is it more how do you upgrade what you have to make us, in your words, as resilient as possible?
I think it's going to be a combination.
Okay, I'm going.
I think it's going to be a combination. I think it's difficult to move away from where the current lines are, but our ability to build in some redundancy is an important factor that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Tremendous. Thank you very much. Can I just say thank you, Mr Campbell, to you and your officials. Now, I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the witnesses that have come here. Minister Brown, you and your magnificent staff, thank you so much for the effort you've put in to help us get through this. On behalf of the committee, I would also like to take the opportunity to wish our great mates at the Secretariat, Jerry and his crew, a very merry and safe Christmas. And of course, as importantly, to Hansard Broadcasting, thank you so much for the effort you guys do behind the screens. On saying that, that concludes today's hearing and the committee now stands adjourned. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't say hello. I've got to catch a plane. Thanks very much. All the best, mate. Thank you. Linda, see you next week if you can believe that rag.